Okay.
The scene is the both of you turn on your computer this morning, and then all of a sudden are sucked through the screen like a cartoon, and then get transformed into your chibi avatars. Appearing
Okay.
appearing on a platform right outside is a skull building with a red neon sign that says "Dead End" on it. And then all of a sudden you hear the voice of Lamari in her Siri voice say,
You've arrived at your destination. Welcome to Muerto City.
all while you hear a Spanish guitar playing in the background. What's your reaction?
Wow.
I'm in awe.
What the
Also,
fuck?
also, I have a tail now, but that's fine, I guess.
We'll roll with it. You can sit on it, so you can be a little higher up on the chair.
There we go.
And so now you guys are in the building, and you're there. I showed you guys a picture. You're on the right side, and then I'll be on the left, and I'll do a little intro, and we'll get started. Welcome to the Dead End Amigos. I'm your host, Mariachi Loki. Today's guests, actually, are two sisters that love to play games on the Outer Reaches crew. Shameless plugs. We've done an interview with both of them. You should totally check it out after this one. The subject of today is the one I'm most curious about. It's homeschooling. Let me introduce our guests, the older sister, Kitcat Kara, and the younger sister, BooBoo. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Of course, I'm so happy you guys are here. So, the first question I have for the both of you is, for you, what is homeschooling?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a very broad question.
You want to go
Kat, go ahead.
first?
No, Kat, you do.
Well, homeschooling. I mean, that was my my main form of education for almost 18 years. Actually, that's not true. Well, maybe it is because preschool. We'll throw that in there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a key part of who I am, and definitely has formed my perspectives and values. But mostly, homeschooling for me is about being a part of a family and a community that valued individualization of education. So looking at um, a kiddo's strengths and weaknesses, and kind of trying to create a program and goal for learning that's um, holistic and beneficial. And I had friends who were also going through it, so it was a positive experience overall because they were also in kind of experiencing the same thing. So for me, it's just a key part of my background, and yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. For me personally, like the way that I saw it was homeschooling was just like every day you're learning, every second that you're learning. There wasn't a moment where like in typical schools, like you leave school and then you're done, or you like maybe do some homework and then that's it. But
Mm-hmm.
because we were at home with our mom teaching us, every moment, even weekends, like we would be doing like science experiments during the weekend, and like there wasn't a moment where we weren't learning. So it offered a lot of opportunities to grow, like Kat said, individually, and have like a different kind of mindset. And at least for me personally, that really benefited me because I hate to sit and do stuff just in general.
Okay.
So making it be like proactively expecting moving sort of learning and just trudging through it really helped. So
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So, I actually had a little conversation with my sister. She did homeschooling for preschool. And what she said is that her aunt would have like a little small desk area, and would be teaching them lessons through that. Did you guys have that kind of setup in the beginning, or was it like your parent would take you to something and at the same time would be teaching you something, like kind of hands-on learning versus at a desk, maybe reading a book or drawing or something like that?
So I can answer that because I'm the oldest, and we started with me, and um, and then so there's like 7 years between Boo and I, and then my parents decided to homeschool all of us. But the way it started for me was, yes, sitting in a desk. So in our house we have like a basement that's finished. There's like windows in it and everything. It's it was set up like a classroom. So my mom had a whiteboard, she had bookshelves, we had desks and chairs. And it was important to for my mom to replicate the classroom environment. So like, you
Okay.
know, not to just feel like you're sitting at a on a couch like goofing off. She wanted to give us like a, hey, it's time to pay attention. You got to sit down. So I know this might dip a little bit into stereotypes, but some people would ask us when we were little if it was like, oh, you just sit around all day like on the couch and play games. It's like, no, no. We were at desks. We were in chairs and we had to pay attention, and it was expected, that school time was school time.
Mm-hmm.
That model
Yeah.
changed a little bit in high school, and we had a little bit more flexibility, but yes, desks, whiteboard, teacher.
Okay.
And that wasn't a full, sorry to jump in, but that wasn't a common thing within the homeschool community that we were part of. Like
No.
some teachers or some mothers or caregivers would do that for their kids and make sure that they're sitting at a desk. But because our mom was a previous educator in the school system, and just because our mom is wonderful, um, she wanted to make sure that we had that structure, so that moving forward, if we went to college or maybe wasn't like weren't interested in doing like homeschooling again or wanted to do anything else, or even for jobs like corporate jobs or whatever, that we could sit at a desk, be quiet, and not just be sitting on a couch all day. It kind of
Unruly and wild.
exactly,
Ah,
yeah,
okay. So she wanted to give you that simulation of like being in an actual classroom. Do you think that it was
yeah.
mainly because she was a teacher and she was most comfortable teaching that way to why she chose to, give you that simulation of a classroom?
That's a
I
good
definitely
question.
I
I
definitely
think
think
both.
so. Yeah. I think you know we've talked before about when your parent is your educator, it brings forth a lot of challenges, right? Like unique ones, like today, hey mom, are you my mom or are you my teacher today? And our mom had to be both. So I think maybe that classroom replication was like a good way of instilling the fact that, hey, for right now I'm your teacher and you have to listen.
Yeah, that's a really good way of putting it, Kat. I never thought of it that way. I think, at least for my personal experience, it was partially just the same like professionalism. I am not as emotionally close to my mother as maybe the rest of my sisters are, and even still, though, having an educator still be your mom, who still disciplines you and all that fun stuff, um, having that clear definition of I am your educator in this place and this is what you are doing and you need to respect me in this space. That's kind of what she was going for. So
Hmm.
um, I don't know if it was because of her background. I think she was honestly just looking for the best outcome for us and trying to prepare us for whatever we needed to do in the future.
And yeah, and if it made it easier for her, I mean, it certainly made it easier for us because we understood the expectation. Like kids really need to know, hey, what, I mean, assuming that intentions are good, kids need to have like expectations that are clear so they know, okay, this is how, this is what I'm supposed to do, and this is how I achieve my own happiness by, following directions or whatever. I mean, I'm making a huge generalization here
Yeah.
about personality, but at least for me, it was helpful that my mom chose that manner of talking through, or like through of instruction, I guess, because I was like, all right, now I need to sit down and it's time for me to learn. And it really helped. I feel like without that, the self discipline that you need to have as like a working professional, and just being I did go to college, so in college and in other classes that I took, which we could get into later, those skills were really important. So, and that's just an important thing, I think, overall, to emphasize is that our experience with homeschooling was like um, very structured. So
Mm. Okay, and do you feel that your mom, who was your educator and teacher, do you feel like she was uh stricter with you guys?
That's a good
uh,
question. No.
No.
nah.
I mean, every parent has a different way of interacting with their child and different boundaries within themselves. But our mom was very structured. She's a very organized individual that was trained to educate people and just has the mind to educate people. So um I wouldn't say that she was stricter. I would say that she was just more organized than maybe other parents that were homeschooling were.
Well, yeah, and just to pop in, I think the other thing we could both agree on is that she was extremely motivated. She wakes up in the morning and is a very motivated individual. And another aspect of her personality is that she um, loves to learn. So one of the things that I recall very, very clearly is just how much fun she tried to put into our learning because she was having fun. And so, like, I remember reading history books, and she did a ton of reading with us, and just kind of I remember like vegging out and just listening to her read the characters and do the voices and
Vegging out.
and
Love that term.
yeah. Well, it was like that because you could just sort of, at least for me, like lapse into your imagination and sit there and kind of imagine all of the characters and the story and the pictures in your mind. And she was great at making that kind of experience enriched by just inserting her own excitement. That didn't apply for all subjects for sure, but she did have. We had, yeah, a unique uh situation where we had a mom who like loved to learn too. So she still
Mm.
does. She's
Mhm.
constantly looking for new things to learn. So
And was it the same for you, Boo?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So, um because as and now being diagnosed with having ADHD as an adult, and you could have seen it in me and as a child, because I was everywhere all the time. But my mom really like toned into that, and precisely what Kat just said, like sitting in the living room while like drawing something or having another activity while listening to a book. And for me, I had to do something else just so I could focus on what she was saying, but she would do the voices, and then your imagination would go into different places because she conveyed it in a way that was so immersive. And yeah, like she loves to learn, and that energy really spread across everything
oh yes.
in so many different ways. And that's why I said earlier, like, there wasn't a time where we weren't learning because
Hmm.
she was learning as well and influencing different things and asking us different kinds of questions like, what do you think about that, or what is that? And then introducing, oh well, we just talked about that in our last science book, or when we were in reading that book from biology, we read about this particular whatever. So do you remember what that is? And like it's a constant refresher all the time,
Hmm.
but it's practical instead of like sitting in front of a bunch of pre-quizzes or whatever. She really made it alive for us, which was
For
really really
sure.
cool.
And going back to like that question of like what is homeschooling for you? That constant like learning, that openness, and I guess I'd say like the inquisitive mind that she sort of instilled in us is what laid the groundwork for that overall um like you know decade plus of experience. Like we would be, for example, I'll give an example. We would take family vacations to Maine or Florida, and we would still have to do schoolwork sometimes. And even still, there were other things that we might encounter on our trips that she could count towards our education, like going to a science museum in Orlando, Florida, or going to Acadia National Park in Maine, and learning about the sea creatures there and becoming junior rangers and things like that. So our life experiences were, in my perspective, enhanced by this like overall uh view of like looking at the world as like a learning opportunity. Like, what can we glean from this? Like, what can we gather and like and add to what we know and how? Yeah. So I don't know.
Not a moment was wasted, essentially.
Hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, let's see. I had a question here. Oh, because your parent was previously a school educator, she had worked with, teaching and educating other children. What would you recommend for a parent that does not have that background, that uh, probably has never taught in their life? What could
Mm.
be something, a step in the right direction that they should work towards? Someone like me.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean,
It
there's of
is.
course a lot of resources for homeschooling people.
Mhm.
There's a lot of stigma behind it. So, I mean, of course, anytime you look up anything on media, you're gonna get like the bad stuff.
Hmm.
But for us in our state that we grew up in, there was a requirement to still at the end of the school year to report to an evaluator who basically looks over the schoolwork that has been done. It's a state thing. You provide a portfolio of everything that you've done, and they also provide requirements that are required by the state. So there's kind of a check and balance there. Um, so there's I don't know how Kat, if you can
Yeah, I
enter. I don't know.
so I in terms of recommending like where to start for a parent who's considering it, I've actually considered doing it myself. I don't have kids yet, but I might in the future, and if I do, I have considered homeschooling them because of the positive experience that we've had. But one of the things I think that's most important, and it's actually something we were getting at in the conversation we've had up until this point, is that you need to ask yourself why am I doing this? Like, why am I interested in doing this for my kiddo? Is it for me? Is it for them? Is it both? Like, so basically putting like a mission statement out there for yourself, because it'll guide your decisions, like what's your ultimate goal in doing this? If you yourself, I feel like uh Loki, just in general, I haven't had tons of conversations with you, but you also have like an inquisitive mind. It's why you do these awesome interviews, and I want to point that out, that when you're looking at um this as an option for a kiddo, like that's the type of quality you need to have, is like the willingness to constantly learn, because every kid is different. All of them have different learning styles, and you versus someone else might have different teaching styles,
Hmm.
and so that's why it's important to focus on like what your main goal is. But on top of that, um reaching out to people who might think the same or have the same concerns or interests is always a benefit. I don't know what state you live in, but in ours there's actually like a state organization that was regulating like what Boo mentioned, like the collection of portfolios at the end of the school year to prove the work that you did and whatnot. Um, and each state has like different requirements for each grade and whatnot. So that's another thing that I would research. I don't know about national organizations for homeschooling. We
Yeah, neither
mostly
do I.
worked on the state level with ours, and so, as far as all that boring logistics goes, I don't know, but yeah,
There's
there's
many
pros.
resources though, and you basically like find your community. There are people out there, and every day's a journey, and you'll find your person. There's other parents going through it, so.
So try to
Sure.
find other homeschooled parents that are
Yeah,
kind of going through the same thing. Do you recommend trying to find it through social media?
Oh, sure. I
you
mean, that's
could,
the main
yeah.
source of any sort of communication at this point. But
I also
uh,
I don't know what your uh like town environment is like, but on a local level, it can also be beneficial to connect that way, because there may be opportunities that are available to a kiddo in your local area that you might not find online. Um, I don't know how people run things these days for homeschoolers, but we did a lot of word of mouth kind of organization. So,
Yeah.
um, I mentioned uh, BooBoo and I were talking about the co-op experience that we had. So, that's something that could be done with other families. A co-op is where a bunch of people get together, and it's a combination of parents and teachers or teacher parents who offer classes, and groups of kids will come, homeschooled kids, to enrich the learning they already are receiving at home. So, maybe mom's not particularly strong in Spanish, so we might take a course in Spanish, Spanish 1 and 2, or art, or, something to that effect. And the other benefit to reaching out locally is there may be school programs that a kid could take advantage of. So, like sports, Boo Boo played lots of soccer,
Yeah,
and
I did.
so did our other sister. I was less sporty, but I also enjoyed participating in some local programs too. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's always a potential option.
So, out of my curiosity, did you guys have a science fair or field trips and things like that too?
Oh, yes.
Oh yeah. So personally, like within like our own family, as well as with co-op groups, at least for me I think Kat, you did as well, right?
Hmm?
Like co-op groups going to on field trips and stuff like
Oh,
that.
yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah,
one of the
so
things our co-ops would do is someone would organize it.
yeah,
Trips.
so we would go around and within our family though, we were very grateful and very gracious to my father, who is working his ass off to even to this day, but during the time of us being homeschooled, to be able to provide the finances to go on different kinds of trips almost every single year, maybe one or two during the year. And so we would go on field trips within our family, but also because we had a little community of other homeschoolers, you just pitch in, just throw in, however amount of money, and then do a full field trip with that community. So we're social. We were social.
That's
Also,
good.
yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know who we would be without that. um, but one of the other cool things is we had some opportunities through our local government. We had a state representative who really, really loved the concept of homeschooling and wanted to help the homeschooling community. So he organized trips to like the state capitol for us, and kind of gave us a tour, and it was just a really, I mean, that's a very unusual kind of thing. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that, but it was really cool because it was someone showing interest in our education and whatnot. And we also had the opportunity to participate in summer camps. Like, I remember being in an opera camp a couple of years ago, or I mean decades ago, sorry, not years. And yeah, I mean, there was just dude, I don't think there was a single second where I was doing nothing, like, my whole life. I think
Yeah, it
it
was it
was
was
all
rare when we would have a weekend to
true.
just like do whatever, but it wasn't overwhelming.
No.
Oh,
And
okay.
I think like the other thing, that another benefit of just having your parent be your educator and involving you in these things is that they can tell when things are overwhelming because they know you.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
So, or it's just overwhelming for the family. And they're, I say that with like a slight twinge because there are parts with that where it's not entirely accurate in terms of like mental check-ins.
Right.
That's just because of our personal experience, but and any experience with having a parent and communicating with people, but
They could get it
they
wrong,
would be
basically.
like weekends where we had to just be like, "No, we're not doing anything. Like,
Mhm.
we're not going to do that." Like
Like, you're not in the mood, I'm not in the mood, we're just gonna end up, like, fighting, like.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, there is a moment where, uh, you guys had to be like, okay, like, honestly, I can't right now. Like, there's
Yeah, and
I
even
have an issue and I need this fixed before I can do anything.
yeah, and our mom definitely I think if we were talking to her right now, she would say to that she would be describing many more instances of burnout than we recall, because I think she was good at just sort of dealing with it and not hiding it from us, but just not making it a part of our concerns. But I think as a parent, homeschooling 3 girls, uh, I think I think that there were some days where it was like, I mean, it was probably beneficial that we learned like domestic skills too, because some days I remember my mom looking at me and like, "Honey, can you just throw that pizza in the oven?" And I'd be like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, mom, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I got
Don't
you."
worry about it. I got you.
But I mean, we were a group unit, right? So, mom was responsible for our education, but we were still a family. So, if there were issues of like lack of energy or being overwhelmed or too much to do, we could communicate about it. And because it was, you know, it's not rigid like a school environment where your teachers are just your teachers and your, you know, parents are at home. So, yeah, it's a unique aspect of our lives for sure.
Okay. So to give you a little basis on like why I'm thinking of doing homeschooling personally for my child,
Mm.
which should be arriving around the spring. We're very excited.
Yay!
Uh, so um, I went to school in a private school. I never touched homeschooling or went into a public school. For what I know, at least since I've been online and conscious, I just remember uh, being in a private school. And sure, I learned morals being in it was a Catholic school, so I learned morals, I learned like the commandments, I learned like Jesus this, I went to church every Wednesday, and like sure, for a younger minded individual that is completely fine because honestly, I feel like we need like a solid surface to, learn morals and know what wrong and right is, even though I was a bully. Uh,
Yeah.
the irony
Confession
of
But
time.
fair enough. But
the,
fair enough.
the irony of that, but that is a whole other can of worms to why I was a bully. But so the thing that I found out through that was that um like BooBoo, I didn't have now I feel like I am ADHD. Like I show all the signs
Mm,
and I'm pretty sure it's been like that since the beginning. The only problem is my parents always knew I was a wild child and
mm.
because my father is also a wild-esque person, they think, "Oh, he is just like his father." So, he says he also may have had the same symptoms of ADHD, but in Hispanic cultures, uh,
Mm.
the concept of mental health does not exist
Yeah.
until a
Mhm.
child is severely in what we say the shithole. That
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
if the church cannot help, nor can the elders figure out what the hell is wrong with them, then we go to a doctor.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So if neither of those help, uh, then that's when you consult a specialist. But what I think, because both me and my wife have the symptoms of ADHD, I feel like we can, if our child shows that they do have ADHD, we'll be able to catch it quicker because they
Oh,
will
sure.
be not only mimicking us but like having the same issues that we had, like
100%, dude.
focusing and things like that. But
Yeah.
on top of that, I just you know my father never put me in public school, and like talking to my wife who did go through public school her whole life, she kind of didn't learn anything that was of value. So if that's the case, then I'm like, you know what, why the fuck would I do that? I would rather know that I am teaching my kid, they are going to learn something, if anything, how to be productive,
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't learn that in high school. I mean, I
Yeah.
could do the Pythagorean theorem backwards and forwards, but I can't tell you when I graduated how to interview for a job.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
things like that, or do my taxes or anything like that. So
Yeah.
I feel like those were just classes that really been needed. Of course, jump into our current education, things like that are being talked about. Thank God,
Mm.
because probably with our generation that have been lost, just trying to figure out life the hard way has just not worked. So I'm glad things
I
are
mean,
in that direction.
I will say though, even though it sounds like I mean, there are many benefits to being homeschooled, but it is hard work.
I could
It
Yes.
imagine.
is a lot. Like, you are learning yourself every single day,
Mhm.
and you're being a parent every single day. You don't have a choice with that. You can kick them out when they're 18, but otherwise, like, you're stuck with this. And it is a learning curve, and it has to be a change of how you see your life, how you see
Mhm.
your realm. And it, I think Kat said earlier, like, it's a holistic mentality. It is effective, it is practical, but also it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
Um and I think that's the reason why, because my mom was juggling so many things, why I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until way later, when my ex was like, "Hey, dude, you should probably go do that," and I was like, "Okay."
That
And then my
specifically was how they did it too. Like, hey, dude, like.
literally, yeah, literally, like, she was like, "You should go get checked out. Like, this is too much for me." And I was like, "That's fair. It's too much for me as well.
You're like,
I
touche,
don't like this."
touche.
And then I filled it out. My doctor came in and he sat down and he did the slight sigh and was like, "You're off the grid." And I was like, "Oh no." And he was like, "Why haven't you been diagnosed earlier than that?" And I mentioned that I was homeschooled. So typically, when you're in public school, you would probably get diagnosed with those kinds of things, because there are more professionals involved in your everyday life.
Hmm.
But um, that just goes back to the cons and well, I wouldn't say cons, but like the difficulties that can come with being homeschooled is because you're a parent, a caretaker, an educator. You have to be aware of all of these other things that other staff would do for you if you just dropped off your kid.
Hmm.
Um, so
You really do appreciate what the school structure provides when, like, you can drop off a kid and like just be like, okay, they're gonna learn, and then they'll come back. But then when
exactly.
they're in the house and you're just like, well, damn, I have to do everything now.
Exactly. It's like when you have like dishes in the sink and you're like, "Oh, who did that? Oh, it was me." Okay.
So, moving into the pros and cons, we've talked a lot about the pros. So, you said that mental health was one of the challenges and possibly a con of it. But what could you say is one of the more bigger cons and maybe some subtle cons that you can tell us about?
Well, I can answer that, and I wanted to talk about this because it actually slips a little bit into stereotypes as well, which is something else we were going to talk about.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, but so there is our experience we described, our daily experience, like our life experience being homeschooled. It was a lot. There was a lot going on most of the times, and it was just a lot of, like you said, not a moment wasted. So um it kind of when your home life is mixed up in your educational life, uh it is a challenge to kind of understand as a child where the boundaries are. um my personality type is a little geared more towards like maybe perfectionism. I'm overly critical of myself. Sometimes I struggle, like when I fail at something or if I can't figure something out, I get extremely frustrated. I'm sure a lot of people share those qualities. I'm not alone.
Mm-hmm.
But I often wonder if the homeschool environment, like the lifestyle that we had, may have contributed to like the worsening of some of those things rather than me overcoming them or confronting them for that matter. Because I guess if you're if your whole day is school and then, you go do a school event at night or you go do a school event on the weekend, there's just like really no break
Mm-hmm.
mentally from it. So, as I got older, I think BooBoo had the same experience. We stopped being in that classroom environment, like I mentioned earlier, with like the desk and the whiteboard. Once we were in high school, we were using textbooks and computers and things like that, and we really weren't sitting down there. So we could be doing school anywhere, and sometimes I do it in my room or the living room. And I think as an adult now, I recognize that I just needed that physical space to be separate, so that I could shut my brain off. So as a result, I think video games became really important to us because it was a physical like break in our, I guess, sensory input
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
from our learning environment, and putting we kind of had that the brakes put on that. So that really helped me stop that, I guess, cycle of like school, 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 but also just kind of give us like a bit of a break when the socializing and the uh, trips and stuff became too much.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier, Loki, about was our parents strict? Strict. That's why I was like, kind. I mean, not really, but it was like expected rules, which I think were helpful. But because of the mental health issues that we were personally having in relation to us just existing,
Mm-hmm.
and also just having a good time, and then also like family influences and all that fun stuff, but at the end of the day we were really like genuinely exhausted, and there was a lot going on, and that is purely because, at least I believe, I'm not sure if Kat can agree with this, but at least in my personal experience, there was too much like happening, and
Hmm.
the expectations were a little bit too much, um, which is ironic because you would, again, back to the stereotype, homeschooling. The stereotype is we sit around like in PJs just having a good time.
Mm-hmm.
But because it was so structured, it was really difficult to sometimes get a break. And
Yeah.
when we did have a break, we appreciated it. But the benefit of that is, and I know that I can speak for Kat. Kat and I are hard workers in our jobs. We
Hmm.
will kill ourselves until we get to a certain point in our job, and there are pros and cons to that. And there are moments that we need to mentally check to make sure that we are okay and constantly dealing with that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there should have been a boundary that was made, and I think that boundary situation was purely related to our particular situation.
Yeah.
And I think that other parents that have homeschooled their kids are, or are currently homeschooling their kids, can definitely make those boundaries and do it a perfect way. We just had a weird experience.
Absolutely. What Boo's talking about is really like um just definitely like that lifelong kind of thing that we've both taken with us, is that like realization that we kind of have to facilitate our own uh balance, I guess, life balance, because it's not easy when you have like an unusual social and educational lifestyle,
Mm-hmm.
to naturally have like you're not just coming home from school like, okay, I'm done seeing my friends, I'm done being at school. Um, so yeah, it's definitely facilitating it feels artificial at first. Facilitating an artificial balance is like super necessary, or yeah, I think for people like us who have that kind of personality of like overachieve, try super hard and do really, burnout, burnout, burnout. um it this homeschool environment that we had kind of just made that a deficit potentially
Mm.
I see.
that
So
we
you
have.
feel that video games, instead of like let's say, wasn't giving you a reality check, it was giving you an escape check to be able
Absolutely.
Oh,
not
100%.
only cope, but I'm guessing like as to quote you, Kat, veg out, so your brain could
Mm-hmm.
be ready for the next lesson.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did your parents feel when video games enter your life? Did you become addicted?
Oh, I personally
Hey,
did.
you calling me out, man? uh,
Clearly, as an adult, like that is different. We all have our own addictions and vices, but as a
Oh, dude, I
child,
would sneak down in the middle of the night because I could never sleep. Like I consistently could never sleep. My sleep schedule is shit. Like I don't know when I sleep or where I am, but I used to sneak down, and I my bedroom was at the top floor, and our office where my old computer used to be was in the basement. So I used to sneak down, and it was an old house, so everything creaked. So I had to figure out how to get down and then like open up Minecraft and being like 13 years old, being like, oh my god, I'm crafting my castle.
I
And
def I
I'm sure your
definitely
mom
remember
loved
that.
that. I'm sure your
oh,
mom really
she
loved that.
there was only like maybe two times where I heard her walking down the stairs because our basement stairs are right behind the office, so you can hear it walking down. And she would come down and just be like, BooBoo. I'm like, oh no, what do you mean? Oh, I'm sorry. I had to send an email.
I had to send an email to no one because I
I'm
have no
like 13 years
contacts.
old.
To this random adult on the internet, I need to send an email real quick.
Oh, give me a second. I have business things.
I'm starting a YouTube channel, mom. Uh,
Well, I definitely I don't recall sneaking games as much, but I definitely uh tried. I, my first games that I ever played, I played Commander Keen, um,
oh wow, okay.
on our old computers. The first game I ever played. We have a picture of me at like 6, holding like a joystick and trying and playing it. Um, so I started off with a platformer. But what happened with games though, our parents realized that we had a passion for it. Obviously, it was clear because we didn't want to stop. So we played a lot of educational games like I'm sure some of these will ring a bell, like Clue Finders, um Carmen San Diego games, Math Blaster, like all the learning company
Oh my
things
god,
where
Math Blaster, Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
that's
that
some good
shit.
shit. Treasure Math Storm. There were like puzzle games, and like our other sister really loved critical thinking ones. I know she played some of those for hours. So we actually at some points in our different grades would get to play video games for school, like depending on the subject. So that was always cool. But in terms of like my escape games, I started playing RuneScape when I was 13. Um, and also, well, when did we find Nancy Drew, Boo?
Good
When did she come into
question.
our lives?
Maybe about maybe when you were 16, 17?
Oh, girl, those Nancy Drew games. They're so old. Some of them, they're still making them. What's it called? The I can't remember the name of the company right now.
Her Interactive?
Yes, we found those games and fell in love and
Shout out!
played those
Kidding.
extensively. Yeah, shout out to Her Interactive. Hire me, please.
Sorry, Loki.
You have a huge fan. They must have you.
Oh
Uh,
yes.
so, Boo Boo, when something like that happens, like, I'm just curious, did your mom discipline you as a uh, teacher or as a parent?
Oh, that's a good question. So
When you clearly were not supposed to be doing something like that, like sneaking into the basement at like 4 in the morning to play Minecraft, and then saying, "Oh, I'm sending an email." Like, I'm sure you went in lying and saying that, but like, trying
yeah,
to give some
so
bullshit excuse.
yeah, so this um Uh, so my relationship with my mom is kind of weird. And oftentimes, if not all times, I have lied to her because I don't feel comfortable being honest with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in those situations, she would be more of a parent of just like, instead of being and maybe Kat, you can agree with this. They're disappointed instead of being angry. And I feel like being disappointed
Is worse.
kind of hurts
Is
Mhm.
worse
because
than
you
being angry.
had exactly because there's an expectation and then you did not meet the expectation. Um and so it would literally be like boo boo. I'm like, oh my
And you'd
god.
be like, please just hit me. Like, I want to feel
Just
the
like,
fit.
can you say anything else? Like, I would love anything else
Can you
apart
say
from
anything?
this. Like, can you be direct? I would love for you to just yell at me right now. This would clear up everything. No? Okay, you're just gonna be sad and I'm gonna have to read into it because you're being passive aggressive. Okay.
Like, at that point, you probably want something that's more like direct or just like get it over with now. Like, just like, I don't know.
Right.
Uh,
And I think to go back into the homeschooling thing, I think like you're mentioning, there should be a difference between educator and parent,
mm-hmm.
and making that clear change in between is really important. And I think that's something that maybe Kat, you can agree or chime in on. But I personally did not feel that there was a clear change at certain times, and it bled into each other a little bit too often,
Mm.
and therefore made some issues. Kat, I'm not sure if you want to.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just the way that we were parented, but I also think some of that like lack of uh a clear line during the days made me feel like I had to be deceptive at some points to um I don't know to I don't know. I feel like that's actually something to think about. I remember having to sneak around to do things sometimes, and it felt like I could just never escape my parents' like reach a little bit. I felt that especially in high school. I think I don't really recall that at all when I was little, but I I just think it's just I don't know. I think because there's only so many roles a parent can take. And I don't think I was ever really friends with my mom. Not that everyone should be friends with their parents. That's a really unique experience. Not everybody has it. Some people don't even want that, which is
Mm-hmm.
totally fair. But I definitely struggled, like just kind of feeling like at the end of the day, after dealing with my mom and struggling with a particular subject or whatever, and then just needing time to like relax and stuff, she might continue to like talk about school after I was done, like talk about what we were going to do the next day. And I would just be like, you know what, mom, I really just don't want to think about that right now. But that was not easy for her to understand, because,
Mm.
like we
Okay.
said before, she was very driven. So I feel like sometimes I kind of had to shape my behavior into something that wasn't really real because she had different expectations, or I don't know. It's
Yeah.
hard to really flesh that out, but I don't know if, Boo, if you.
Yeah, no, you had very quickly within our home situation, you had to self advocate for yourself very often,
Yeah.
if you were not feeling a certain way. And um, I think there's a benefit in that. Like sometimes people would see, like, if you were to, Loki, if you were to walk into our home situation at the time, you'd probably be like, what the hell is going on right now? But you mentally you're developing, you're finding your own place, you are finding your own balances, and eventually it'll set in eventually, and we'll be okay. And the personality traits of our mother is just, she means the best and she wants the best for us. She's so caring. And sometimes it doesn't relate well. I mean, you can mean whatever you want. Like you could love somebody to an endless amount and still they may not receive it. Um, and I think our mom at sometimes was just overwhelmed and dealing with a lot of stuff. And she really did her best though.
Mhm.
But being aware now, as maybe you may be a homeschooling parent, super exciting. You have the awareness of being connected with your child, being connected with your partner, communicating through that, making sure that there isn't any kind of miscommunication, and not being a stinky parent slash educator. There's
Mm.
education time that is separate, and then there's parent time that is separate. And
Mm.
Yeah.
creating those separations, that might be verbal, it might be physical, where there is a particular schoolroom, or we're in a different place. So I think I don't know.
Well, and the other thing about I don't know, just the way that the relationships kind of shift and change in this environment that we've had. I think it's really important, like Boo Boo was mentioning, to keep like a really good relationship with your kiddo, because understanding like their limits and their needs and making sure that they are voicing those is really important.
Okay.
Because you don't want your kids to be like, oh, mom or dad really wants me, they really want me to do this thing and I don't want to do it, but I don't want to disappoint them. And they do it and they keep doing it and they keep doing it and they hate it and they get miserable, which is kind of something that ended up happening to me over the years. Um, that's not a good thing. So you know, I think that that's kind of unique to me because um I was the oldest and I think my parents learned a lot from from trial and error with me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh but yeah, it's just important. I remember what specifically relating to education, or just options or whatever. I felt like my mom, driven as she was, would often drive us as much as she could to like make decisions to do things. But maybe we didn't want to do that particular thing, but still could have achieved that goal by doing another thing. Like for example, I really hate sports. I hate them. I'm not competitive in a physical way at all, and I just don't even have that gene in me. So being in a group of people, like running up and down a soccer field in 85-degree weather, everyone's dying and no one knows the rules, like that is not a good time for me. um, but my mom wanted us to have like a more full, experience, which is fair, totally fair. We should have, school, we should have physical, fitness things, whatever. But it was really a challenge for me and I hated it and I was miserable and she really wanted me to just do it. So I tried, but like it just really stole any joy that I could have taken out of doing something else. So like later on in the future, um whenever she would like make suggestions to do other things, I was like, well, you didn't listen to me last time when I said I hated it. So I'm not really going to give you my, preferences because I kind of feel like you won't really care anyway. So like, there's just a little bit of that. That's a personal thing. That's like a relational problem that she and I had, but it kind of bled into, college and stuff. Like uh here are the colleges that we think you should go to. Like, why don't you make a choice among them? I'm like, well, why can't I just choose a college that I want to go to? That kind of thing. Like, when you have adults who care deeply about their children's education, so much so that they make personal sacrifices, and then their kids understand that, like, it kind of creates an impossible situation for the kid if they're sensitive enough to be like, well, I just want to make my parents happy. It might come
Mm-hmm.
at, at a cost to the child's
You become a
uh,
pleaser, a people
needs.
pleaser.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's who I am. But who knows? That might not be because of homeschooling. That just could be because of my personality and my parents, but you know, that's how it unfurled in terms of in within my educational experience. It definitely impacted that.
So to
Yeah.
avoid that, do you think checking in with your child as a parent instead of as a teacher, uh, to be like, hey, so be honest with me, did you like that said activity, or were you
Yeah,
miserable? And then once they say their honest opinion, then you're like, okay, well, we won't do that. However, I want you to try this instead, which is a lot less than say going to a sport. It is like say an art venue with with more kids. So
Yeah,
yeah,
how about
100%,
like
dude.
you give them another option, and instead of being like, well, you kind of signed up for this, you kind of just keep going until you're like completely drained of happiness.
right.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
and more than just like, so that would definitely work for a younger kid, but maybe as I guess when you're becoming more like preteen, teenager, if you're getting into a point where, you know, mom says I need to do this, dad says I need to do this, but I really don't want to. Like I don't want to take a physical education class at a college. Like that sounds really terrible. I don't want to do that. But I would really love to take gymnastics. That would be so fun. That was my situation. But my parents
Okay.
are like, well, this and that, not really, this is the most convenient thing for us, whatever, that makes sense. Like it was a small disappointment on my part,
Yeah.
but they could have said, hey, we'll try to make this happen, or oh, I'm sorry sweetie, we can't make that happen, or be like, hey, why don't you research options? What do you want to do for phys ed? Like,
Yeah.
do you want to look online? Do you want to, like, and give options rather than saying, this is all we are able to do, this
Kind
Mm-hmm.
is
of like
the
an
only
an
thing.
active like education or like learning or communication. Just being like, okay, this doesn't work. A doesn't work, so B might be, I don't know. And so eventually we get to C, which is the solution. So what is the A B situation? Let's get to the solution, and make it practical. Let's be honest. And I think the main thing that I think that we missed within our homeschooling situation, was there was a lack of honesty at times. There was a lot of I don't knows. And I think that kids need a lot of I know this. I'm
Hmm.
going to be honest with you, so that it creates a better communication. Just like legit communication is key. Like,
Mm-hmm.
did we cannot do this because of this, or you cannot go here because of this. And I think this would be bad for you. And just keeping that communication, I think, really helps and develops the mental independence, because no matter what age a child is, they will latch on to whatever you say to them,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what it is, because everybody's human. And
Right.
keeping that the mentality of this is a human, thank you for blessing me with this, wonderful, and to increase the betterness of their life. How do you do that for any other person, for your friend? Okay, I see a problem, I'm going to call it out, right? So my child is having a problem, I'm going to call it out. And when you're an educator for your child, you will see all of the problems, and because you're so closely connected to them. And to make it practical, you be like, hey dude, I see you're having trouble with these like math problems. We can work through it, or I can help you with it, or we can make it into something else and then do
Yeah.
another project. Like,
and
there's so many options.
and it's important, I think part of this, like, uh having this relationship with your kid as a parent and a teacher, it's important not to take, like, say they're not doing very well at something, or you feel like they're not learning very well because of just the way that you're teaching, or the way that they're just struggling with something. It's so important not to take like those mini failures personally. It's uh being constantly willing to learn and change, is really, I think, essential for a kid to succeed because needs change. You know, they shift over time. But ultimately, I don't think kids should feel like they're taking like like their failures are, or I think failure is not a good word. Their struggles should they shouldn't feel guilty for struggling. You know, like you shouldn't be like, my mom thinks that I failed because I didn't do this thing correctly, and how can I, I'm such a failure because my mom thinks she's a failure." You know, like that kind of toxicity isn't great. So it's really
Hmm.
good to treat that environment like a team effort. Like, I'm in this with you, sweetheart, darling child of mine. I'm in this with you, and I want to be a part of your learning process, and I want to build you up. I want you to become the best kiddo you can be so you can be a cool adult. Um, and making sure that they understand that you are fallible, like you're trying to learn. And that doesn't mean that, they shouldn't that that they shouldn't respect you, and that your final word is your final word. But it's definitely important to communicate that teachability without, you know impacting them too much when something is not working right, or they're struggling, or your kiddo is struggling.
Coming back to the boundary, do you feel like what would have helped more if your mom did this to help, I guess, solidify and make clear when she is a teacher versus when she is a parent?
Hmm.
Do you
I
think
think for
Hmm.
that it would be like something she would wear? Like, this is my school teacher outfit,
that's
and then when I take this off, I am your parent, kind of thing.
That's so funny you said that, because that's the first thing I thought of. For like little kids, I think you could easily put on two different hats, literally. Like, okay, mommy's got her teacher hat on, or daddy's got his teacher cap. Like, this is teacher time, because that's a visual reminder, and little kids really benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
But for adults, like, teaching your child functional communication is really important. So, um, well, I say adult, I mean like preteen, teenagers, when kids are more able to formulate their thoughts and feelings and
And then they're like,
express their
"Dad,
needs.
stop being cringe. Take off
Yeah,
that damn hat."
Exactly.
exactly. Like that, I
Dad,
know
why'd you
your
put that
teacher mode
bat
right now.
on? Oh my god,
It's
leave me
like
alone. I just want to play
it's
Fortnite.
like, do you have to put on your mariachi outfit when you teach me every time?
Oh
I'm not 5 anymore.
no! I hate it here.
And then they'll be like to their friends, and that's why I shiver every time I see a mariachi on TV.
That's why I shiver. I give them PTSD of mariachi. It's like, oh no, they're gonna teach me something. Oh no, my dad hired them. They're gonna teach me something. It's my substitute teacher. Oh my god, I can see that scarring happening, and I am getting so much joy out of it somehow because it's just funny to me. But so in the beginning, you would say uniform, some sort of clothing would help, but
Yeah.
for like adult, but like teenager, someone who doesn't need that kind of visualization, you just like tell them, check in with him. I guess it was like, hey, so
Yeah.
Yeah,
maybe
I
do like
mean,
a peace sign or a you cross your fingers, be like, hey, so I'm teacher mode right now. What's
I
up?
mean, so Kat and I both work in the autism support whatever, and so we both have training and ABA, and that is just basically you deal with humans and treat them well. And when people have developing brains, it's very easy to make boundaries and to also make expectations. And so, um, making a room, for instance, being like, this is our teaching room. This is the only place this is happening. That's it. Or having expectations, even when your kid is older. Yeah, they're gonna be shitheads no matter what. But
Uh-huh.
like still being like, hey, dude, we're gonna do our math homework, but after this, we can do something that you want to do for like 5 minutes,
Yeah,
and
working
then
for yeah.
like having goals, having rewards, and making it practical to whatever. And I think what's important that I really appreciated from our mom, and again, we've already said this, but I'm sure Kat, again, you can agree, having that schoolroom that we were in was really helpful
Mhm.
because everywhere else, like, it was an open basement. There were other like, there was a TV room, which was also a playroom and whatever, and then there was, like, the living room and whatever, but where our desks were, that was school.
Mhm.
So, even, like, playing, I remember, like, thinking mentally, "Oh, I shouldn't go by here because the desk is cold and it's for school time, and I don't need to do school right now." I remember having, like, a visceral reaction to it, so creating those boundaries means just creating spaces and
Mhm.
expectations and whatever that may mean for whoever you're with. And you'll learn that as you get to learn your person, which is super fun.
Okay.
And also modeling that conversation again and again, like saying, "Hey, this is just a check-in. Right now, I just want to like give you like a dad talk and just an opportunity to talk to me like dad and kiddo. Like these are, this is a moment to just tell me how you're feeling and just make that like a regular part of their day so that they learn to, advocate for themselves, but to you is probably really helpful. Even though that's like so direct and maybe it wouldn't work for every kid.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it would have gone very far with someone like me who uh, doesn't always voice their needs because I worry that they're a burden to other people. Like it would have gone so far for for my parent to come to me and say, "Hey, do you have a need? Is something need to change?" Like some kids just need that.
Okay. So basically, figure out which way the kid is going to honestly answer when you ask them, whether if it's direct, indirect, or through a playful session or anything like that. Because I could imagine, like, if your kid isn't one to really want, like you said, if they think that whatever they're going to say is going to burden the parent,
Yeah.
they're not going to want to say anything. They're going to be like, no,
Right.
everything's great, it's perfect, and be like, I cast doubt on that.
Yeah.
Yes.
I
It also
mean,
supports the development of a deceptive child because they just never deceptive, like self-deceptive and also deceptive to others because they'll never feel like their real true feelings and needs are valuable. It's
Hmm.
not good.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm definitely learning a lot on this journey. Um, and we've only hit like question 4.
Oh shit.
so, so how did your homeschooling start? And do you remember your first and last lesson?
Oh.
um no.
No.
So it started when I was born. So
I
the
walked
reason,
out of my play hut and I was like, "Hi guys, it's learning time."
yeah, exactly. So, just an overall, I think one of the main driving reasons that we were homeschooled was because of my parents' religion, um, but also because of their education. Um, they wanted to provide something that was different and more integrated, and also we had like not great public schools, and our private school that was nearby was well not nearby, and so um
It was more convenient.
yeah, and again we were blessed by my father having a job that could actually provide for the family while my mom stayed home,
Right.
so she could be a full educator. I'm very, very grateful. Shout out to Peter. Thank you so much. He's been working his ass off for so many years, and everything that I am, and I'm sure Kat, you can agree, everything where we are right now is because of him.
Oh yeah.
Um, and so that's kind of how it started. He just sat down and just worked his ass off and
Well,
did it for mom.
actually, way really early on, like back in the 90s when our parents moved to the area that we lived our whole lives, they found a lot of people who were homeschooling their kids. And
Okay.
they became really close friends with them and were so they had I think I was only maybe a year or 2 old at the time when my mom started making friends with these ladies. We like Boo said, we grew up in a religious house home. We went to church Wednesdays, like youth group.
Mm-hmm.
Sundays church. So anyway, a lot of our social environment was kind of based around that, but also that's where my mom kind of met all these people, and it was an experiment for a lot of them, and it was in reaction to the issues that were happening in local schools around us. And it's just interesting because there's a lot of stuff going on in schools these days, more along the lines of safety concerns,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And so it's, it was a valid concern that they all had, of what do we do with our kids. So my mom just kind of became a part of like a little mini movement in the area, and she actually started becoming a bit of a leader in some of those groups, helping with like extracurriculars, like plays, like having like school, like mini school plays basically, where homeschool kids could become a part of them. And she did that throughout our school time, and Boo Boo actually participated in a lot of them, and so did I. um
I
and
sure
so
did.
and so yeah, so it was that convenience, really, community of people that also agreed and had similar values. The goal, and I think this is important, this is my understanding of our parents. The goal was to provide the best education they could in a safe place without minimizing the uh missing out factor.
Mm.
Okay.
So they wanted to give us everything because they were both very social individuals in their schools, like very, I wouldn't say popular kids, but
No,
sometimes
they
that's,
were. Okay,
I guess,
listen.
whatever.
Legit, my dad was the jock.
Oh
Our
yeah,
dad was the
that's true.
jock. My mom, our mom, was the cheerleader.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, like
I kid you not.
two
It's
two
perfect.
jocks, literally.
Yeah.
But they were both religious and went to a private Christian school, and actually that's how they met.
Still, they were the popular like social groups. So.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
both played sports. They played a lot of sports. Um, and so that was they had values in that, in like that social environment, but they also saw the issues that were happening in private in a excuse me, public schools, um and just didn't want to have. I remember my mom saying this: we just didn't want you guys to worry about the people that were around you when you were at school. We wanted you to like be able to just sit down and learn, because that's what school's about. It's about learning,
Hmm.
and uh, broadening your perspectives and enhancing the life around you and being a part of a healthy community. And I don't think that I agree, actually, absolutely, that they made the right decision, because what was happening in our area would not have facilitated that. It would not have been possible for us to be as successful as we ended up being, because it was just a tough place. So,
The reason my father chose, he was the one actually that advocated for me to not go into public school and instead go to private school, was because he was a janitor. That was one of his first jobs. He was a
oh
janitor
wow.
at a public school, and he was he was a janitor at a high school, and so he would see all the trouble kids because they would have him like clean the floors and do all the janitorial things. And for the rest of his time, this was actually part of his job. He was a quote unquote kind of guard, but patrolling the areas that he just cleaned, because
uh,
that school was so bad that they knew that there were people skipping out, doing drugs, smoking, and just vandalizing. So he
Yeah.
was the one keeping an eye on that, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't want you to," because when I was born, I was a very scrawny, tiny, bony kid. So he was like, "You're gonna be bullied. Like, there's no way I'm putting you in that fucking environment to end up smoking, doing drugs, or uh, drinking in school. Like, I'm not doing that for you." So instead,
mm.
Yeah.
he injected me full of Jesus, and and
Oh,
Wow.
Jesus. Ah. Suddenly, Jesus.
and suddenly Jesus, and yeah, and now I am a undead mariachi doing interviews.
All right,
But
fair enough. Well,
uh
Wow.
I mean, it
Fast
worked.
forward.
yeah.
I do have I sent this to you, Loki, but I can read it out right now. Mama sent a full message
Oh,
about her
sure.
being a homeschooler mom. If you
Mama
want to
T.
send it, or
Can
if you
you
want to
read it out
say
loud,
it,
please?
I could do. Yeah. Um, Homeschooling was a decision I made under full conviction that I was ultimately responsible for the education of my children, no one else. Initially, I knew since I was trained as an educator, I could get my children started with the first couple years, with God's help. Early on, I would evaluate after the end of each year to determine whether I should continue. After a while, it became such an important part of our family. I stopped questioning and realized it was part of what we do as a family, learn with each other. Of course, there is no perfect educational choice, but I learned by offering my children the opportunity to learn at their own pace and partner with other people in our network to make up any gaps that I would have. That homeschooling was for our family, and that was the best for them. I'm thankful for the countless individuals that gave advice and provided help. I couldn't have done it without supportive, without a supportive husband who saw the value sometimes more than I did. After 20 years and 3 graduates, I wouldn't have done it any other way.
Wow.
Awesome.
Mama. That makes me tear up a little bit.
Straight from the educator herself.
Yeah, but that's who she is. She really is. Like, she just always, I mean, she always made those sacrifices for us. It was always about what she thought was best. And, that's the thing. Like, we talk about the pros and cons and how these things have sort of bled into our lives in the future, like the lifestyle, the all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but fundamentally, and you can tell by all the things that we've been talking about, we were very privileged people. So, and we're very, very cognizant, or we really understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Like this, this way of introducing your child to the world and giving them the vehicle to, absorb information in a kind of like environment that's more s- not controlled but structured, it is a huge privilege. And it really it, there's so many parts. It's like a chemistry equation. Like there's so many parts that really need to go into it to make it work and to be functional long term. So I think that one of the points that our mom mentioned is really something to think about. Constantly reassessing at the end of each year, like she did, was essential to making sure that the perspective was still there, like the goals were still there. And so, I don't know, teachable parents and parents that care and have the resources, these are all things Boo Boo and I are well aware are things that made us, we're lucky, I
Yeah,
guess. I don't take it for granted ever.
Boo Boo, do you have anything to add to
not at all.
that? Okay. So I found this one on the internet, and I don't know if you guys have any specific answer to this, but I'm curious. Uh, do you know what you need legally to homeschool? Does it require a degree?
That is state based, and I would encourage you to look at your state's requirements
Yeah.
because the federal government doesn't legislate homeschooling. So um, there's no real. Most likely these days, there's probably a requirement to submit proof of like work completed. I think that's probably true, but some of the states out west are a little different, so I don't know. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But in
I
our
yes and that.
in our state, there was no requirement for the educator to have a degree,
Okay.
um, but you were required to complete certain subjects, like certain math levels, certain reading levels, and we also took standardized tests every year to
Yes,
demonstrate
Oh, okay.
our
That
learning.
was actually a further question down,
like
but I was
SATs
curious
and all
about
that kind of
that.
stuff.
Like, how was standardized tests for you guys? Did you take it at a high school? Because I remember sometimes that our private school would
Yeah.
send us to a
Yeah.
public like college to take a standardized test.
Yeah, it was the
Mhm.
same thing. Like typically, what they kind of block out just so everybody can do it. Just a group activity, basically. I took the SET
Well, we call
twice.
it that. It's the in our state, it was called the Stanford Achievement Test, so the acronym is SAT, but that's not the same as a college SAT.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. Um, but I would go for that. I went there twice. I did that twice.
Twice in your
In my
life?
junior year and my senior year.
Oh, okay. Usually towards the end of high
Um,
school is when they ask for those,
yeah.
I'm sure.
Um, but that was at a public school, where everybody else was doing it. So I think,
Actually,
Kat, you had the same experience.
oh yeah.
I think so I'm not sure actually if you did the test as much as our other sister and I, but every year we did the assessments just to like I remember my mom talking about how she used it to see like, hey, should we be spending more time in math? Like, should we be doing more in like composition? Like, what where are the? She used it as like a measuring stick to see what she needed to be doing, working more on. But I
Okay.
don't know if she had you do those every year, Boo. I think at that
No,
point
not
they
as
were maybe
much.
excessive. Yeah, because every year to do that kind of test is pretty freaking exhausting. It took us like 3 days. I remember it was a
Oh
lot,
my god.
but
I did a couple of them, but not as consistent.
yeah, I think she learned from from that point.
So was that a standardized test or was it a more like a personal test that she made herself to figure out
No, is a
what your
standardized.
Yeah,
oh,
it was
okay.
standardized. And what that means, just to clarify, that means like your parent cannot facilitate it, like somebody else needs to do it. So
Yeah.
we had a family friend who um,
Mm,
facilitated that.
no,
And
actually it was we knew that person, but in the way that the in order to like actually get um the procedures that you have to be assessed by somebody in a group like uh
oh, I'm
like
sorry, I might be thinking like elementary, middle school idea.
yeah, there's different achievement tests. I think the PSATs or something like that were used in our state for other schools. The type that we had, it was administrated by a person from our homeschool community who had to get certified in apply in giving the tests. And we had, I mean, actually, now that I think of it, earlier in my years, there were larger groups of us, and so there were multiple people doing tests for different grades. So we would like have a test day. Um,
Gotcha.
yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. Um
yeah.
oh actually this before I forget, my sister had a question. She asked, did you have the option to go to public school if you so chose?
No,
Yes.
I
Uh,
didn't personally.
yeah, I was when I was 12, my parents sat me down and were like, "Hey, so um, we've been talking, and we want to make sure that you are getting the most out of what we're giving you, but we want to make sure that you know that you have the option to go to school if you want to." And at that point, all my friends were homeschooled, most of them. And if not, I saw them at church or other events that we would
Mm-hmm.
do. So I was like, why the hell would I go to school? Um, and I loved it. So I
Okay.
I wasn't I wasn't I didn't want to. But yes, they gave us the option. I mean, me the
And
option.
but for you, I'm guessing it was uh, a different issue.
Yeah, so my experience with my parents was a little bit funky. Our communication was not great, by many myriads within that. But it was just homeschooling all the way through.
Okay.
Um, they seemed to think that it would work for me, and it did. But I was dealing with a lot of other shit that they didn't understand.
The
So
the
having this space,
yeah.
was worth it.
Okay. So have you ever thought back if they did ask you the question, would you have taken it?
That's a good question. You know what? Yeah, I think I would. Um, I was dealing with so much like mental bullshit during my high school years that I feel like having physical people every single day just to like regulate myself would have helped. Um, but at the same time, I'm so disfocused in everything. So, um,
You think that you would have had struggled learning?
yeah, the teacher would have been like, "Boo boo, what the hell?" And I'd be like, "I'm sorry."
Those exact
Hands
words.
up, I'm sorry.
What the hell?
Sorry. I did do it. um but yeah, I mean, my my experience with being homeschooled is severely different than Kat's. 7 years does a lot. um our parents have become more progressive and um more willing to listen um since the time of them homeschooling cat. And then there's me, the queer non-binary, like, hey, how are you? Can I bust down your door? I'd love to. Excellent, great. Even as a child, I would like lick people's feet. Like it was a problem. It was a problem child.
Hold on, hold on. That was so like out of left field. Wait, what? I'm so like.
Okay. All right. So I'm sitting
Oh,
at the
please
kitchen
cut. Yes.
table. I'm
Yes.
in. We have this kitchen table. It's been beat up. My name is etched into it somewhere. Boo Boo has stickers on underneath of it. It's beat up. But we're sitting there at dinner, and nobody can find Boo. It's time to eat, and Mom is calling Boo. And all of a sudden, I'm not wearing socks because I stepped in a puddle in the kitchen, and for me, that's like a sensory no-no. Like
Oh, I
I
can
hate it.
imagine. You're just like, my fucking foot is wet because of the sock.
Hate it. So I took it off, but I was wearing the other sock for some reason. But underneath of the all of a sudden, I feel like wetness on my toes, and I'm like, "What the heck is that?" And I'm thinking like, "Oh, like maybe there's more water under the table, whatever." And then I lift up the table cover, which smells like vinegar because that's how my mom would clean it. And there's Boo Boo. She's just like licking my foot, and I'm like, "Ew!" And so I pull it away. Boo Boo hit her head. So, naturally my mom thought that I like beat her up or something, and she started crying. And no, and I know this is oddly specific, Boo, but this definitely happened on multiple occasions because
Oh
you
my
just hide
god!
under the table. So yeah.
Was this the practical joke? Like, it's like there's like teasing and things, and just Boo Boo licking your foot is like the
Yeah.
joke of the day.
I just Boo Boo was like a really fun and creative, still is. Boo Boo is a fun and creative person, and with that comes a lot of personality quirks. And when they were really little, it was like yeah. So I mean, Boo was climbing on things all the time. She was like, they were, yeah. The door thing that you do, Boo, like you would climb up the door like
Oh
frame
yeah,
with your
yeah.
hands and feet. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that just if you were looking for Boo, looking up would probably be a decent bet for trying to find them because that's yeah, climbing
And
everywhere.
but
Chaos.
again, like to reevaluate, to focus this conversation, um I would have been evaluated pretty quickly if I was in a public school system versus being
Yes.
homeschooled. And so there is a lot of pressure to make sure that your kids getting, you know, their local checkups, and if you see any things that are happening, and um there's so many resources for other people whenever they're wherever. So
Well,
just be aware.
I'd also like to speak to something on that subject of, handling um if you are attempting to homeschool and you're becoming aware of the fact that your kid is neurodivergent in some way or has some other needs in terms of learning, um, it's all good to educate yourself and to like not just push through and be like this isn't happening, it's no big deal or whatever, because that's only going to prove to be a disadvantage down the road, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that if you're able to do that and you're able to be open-minded and say, okay, I'm willing to consider that my kid has ADHD, um, then you know that's a great thing, because you're able to consider, do research and talk to the right people about how to implement that into your learning process for them. On the other hand, if you were sending your kid to school and teachers are like, "Hey, I think this kid should be diagnosed with ADHD," and they go through the process, they get assessed, they get an IEP, they get all of those helps that you can get. That's great, but in my experience, and I guess it's kind of hard to explain how I have this knowledge, but um, I've learned that even after those assessments are done and kids are given extra helps related to their diagnoses, I don't think public schools adequately provide for kids with those needs.
Okay.
Even though they have the resources to help diagnose and provide, like the learning plans, the IEPs, I don't think that they really help enough.
Okay.
Um,
I think, yeah.
and Kat, in case somebody doesn't know, can you explain what an IEP is?
It's called an individualized education program. So kids in school, I'm not a teacher, but I work in a autism clinic. So, we have a lot of school aged kids who have these and they come in with them from their schools. And basically, it gives them permission to have more time taking tests, different forms of test delivery, like they could be verbally delivered instead of written if that's a particular struggle for them. They tend to have more time to write papers, things like that. So just like stuff to help them actually, achieve the work that's given to them with their, needs in mind.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So it's what for someone who had no idea of what an IP was, it's what my understanding back then what it was. It was the quote unquote special treatment. I'm guessing is probably how I would have called it. Like
Yeah,
the extra
like
time
yeah,
that
it
Probably.
feels like the special treatment,
yeah,
right?
yeah, quote
But making
unquote.
it more practical,
Yeah.
like everybody needs special treatment. I need special treatment, like sometimes I need a little uppies, Let's make it practical.
Definitely. Okay, so the next question is did you take online classes or virtual classes while homeschooling?
Yes.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
We actually, there was a particular, I mean, there are actual like schools out there for kids to who are being homeschooled to plug into. I think BooBoo did a lot of classes with something called the Potter School,
Yeah.
and that was, I think, it was a hybrid format, right? Like most kids were homeschooled and most were, and also
Yeah,
did the
it
online
was
classes.
weird. It was just like either extracurricular or purely homeschool certification.
Did you feel like
Okay.
those classes helped?
Oh, 100%. I mean, at least for me personally, like I made a lot of friends. There were chats that were online, and also I learned very quickly how bad I am in English.
Oh.
And I'm still friends on Facebook right now with my teacher that really influenced and supported my creative work that I did in writing. And not friends with my French teacher, which was expected because that's just how it is when you're a French teacher. But yeah, it was a really great experience. I actually was able to meet with them I think it was in New York or something. One of the classrooms, and yeah, I really enjoyed it personally. It was outsourced for sure, but it the and Kat, you might be able to. I know you have a lot of experiences with online courses, but
Hmm.
personally, I really appreciated the expectation. It felt like college work in the best way possible. So whenever my friends would come up to me and be like, "Oh, I'm in college. I'm doing whatever." I'm like, "Yeah, I already did that." Like it's very simple. I've been doing it. Beach. So,
Yeah, I took some courses that I think my parents didn't really get us into those until later in my years of education. So probably I was like 15, 14 or 15 when I did my first online course. But it was really helpful because that's becoming an increasingly popular mode of learning. So it's a good um, way to learn. But also like I really appreciate that my parents pushed me to do it because I was able to take AP courses to take AP classes for college credit. And that saved me a lot of money and kind of made me feel like, ah, shit, like I can do this when I got to school. Like I was like, ah, I understand the expectation. After I graduated high school. So, um, and I also think that online courses are important because they really teach you how to organize yourself and be answerable. I think Boo mentioned this, be like answerable to somebody who is not your parent,
Okay.
who is not a face to face adult, but someone you have to like maintain professional communication with, and like you have to talk to them, email them. So it's good practice for sure.
Okay. And when did you get? Do you remember what grade or what education level you guys were at when you started the online classes?
Uh,
mine was sixth or seventh grade.
Okay, so
I think,
middle school.
yeah, I think I was a sophomore in high school.
Okay, so you were in your high school. So definitely towards once you get the foundations down, I'm guessing of learning, then you could start looking towards
Yeah,
taking online classes, which I do personally agree that online is the way of the future. And honestly, which is
Sure.
one of my downfalls why I need to go to a physical classroom because that is how I've been conditioned my whole life to learn,
Mm.
take notes, be in a lecture, like that kind of thing is how I learn, which is why I tried online, but just the concept, I just get like Boo says, bouncing off the walls, and I can't focus because computer is game time. So
yeah.
Right.
it's a completely different thing when I go to an actual building with a chair and a desk, and there's a teacher lecturing, pointing, and all that stuff. That's learning
And you're like,
time.
"Oh shit, I'm supposed to listen."
I'm supposed to be taking notes. So that's how I
Yes.
learned. So I do feel like the quicker we can get them to learn online, the easier things will be. Because honestly, I feel like college is probably going to turn online, all of it, in the future.
Hopefully,
Because
hopefully it means it's cheaper.
yeah, let's hope for that. Uh, and that's my opinion on that. That I feel like, and plus there are way more courses online, not even just of school, like of other things. You could learn how to animate, draw, things like that online, and really having to be able to focus on that kind of stuff, I feel like would be a benefit, which was something I never got a chance to have. Which I could probably
Oh yeah.
train myself, but it would be a struggle, most definitely. Um, so
I
what?
definitely
Oh,
see the advantage, yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
so I had a question on because you had a parent that was doing, working all the time. What was the budget for your education? Do you know?
Phew, I don't know.
I don't know.
Well,
Um,
I can tell you what things were done to make it affordable.
Okay.
Um, So one there was a statewide homeschool fair that my mom would go to, I think almost every year, where there were, teachers and people, organizations and other parents who would bring extra books and textbooks and material, audio books, just tons and tons and tons of learning stuff. and they would bring them all together and have a fair where you would like sell them and buy them and exchange. And that really earlier on in the early 2000s and 90s was essential, you know, for saving money because textbooks, I mean, they're so expensive these days, but
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, that's what made it possible for sure.
Okay. So reaching out, it was a community-driven thing.
I think
Yeah.
it was organized by the organization that I mentioned before, like the homeschool
Homes
organization.
Okay.
homeschool or wait, what is it? HHO.
What?
Homeschool- Homeschooling something
Bobo's
organization
talking
of the
talking to themselves.
PA thing, or I don't know.
So if we're saying there's
There's a
gonna be
Yeah.
whole
like OSHA,
organization.
OSHA's coming up all of a sudden, it's like, what are we talking
Yeah,
about?
they have their own like letters that they associate with. I forget what they are.
Um, I think that they're probably the organization that we had is called the Pennsylvania Homeschoolers Accreditation Agency because we were educated in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But
And
did they run that though?
I don't know.
I don't
I
think
don't know.
they did.
But it was one of
Well,
the organizations that was involved in your
We're
education.
organized. Everybody, we're organized. Great job. Nice job. We did it.
if you Google homeschool fairs, there's actually stuff that pops up from all different states. It's interesting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so because we were in Pennsylvania as well, because of the influence of the Amish and Mennonite communities, it's pretty prevalent in that area as well. We were not grown up as either of what I mentioned by any means, but the state laws and all that fun stuff is still applied.
Okay. I'm actually writing that down to get more information on that in the future. Um, so I have a question for each of you. Uh, what is your learning style?
Go ahead.
Um, so it seems as though face-to-face learning is actually my weakest thing.
Okay.
Like a teacher speaking to me in person is very distracting because I find it's hard to listen to the words when I'm looking at their face. I even find that in face-to-face communication with my friends these days. So I prefer actually faceless like communication for teaching if I have to have a teacher. But my best learning style is reading a textbook and taking notes, or listening to something and taking notes, writing things down as I am as it's being inputted into my brain is important. And then afterwards, I take all of the stuff I've written and like summarize it, like make like either like by highlighting it or writing a more succinct outline. And that whole consolidation process is what really gets the information crammed into my brain.
How does someone teach faceless? I'm really curious about that. Does she like stand behind you and read the textbook, or
Oh, uh,
she's just
so
not looking at you? Like, look into my eyeballs. We are going to read.
no, I meant like so like for the online classes that we would take, there would be someone just speaking. It wasn't a video thing. It would
Okay.
just be a voice call. That's
Okay.
kind of what I was referring to. Yeah.
How about
I mean,
while
but also
homeschooling?
like if a kid is having issues with like just I mean, this kind of divulges into how I learn. I also struggle with being in front of somebody and seeing their face because I'm constantly analyzing what they're doing.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody's behind me or just um, gives me an instruction without me looking at them and giving me over and over and over verbal instruction, I can get the shit done.
Okay.
And the way that
And
that would work in like you were just asking Loki about how that would work with our like mom like reading a textbook with us. I think the most comfortable thing I can remember is like if she would be sitting next to me and we were at the table, we were like both reading the textbook together. But
Okay.
I don't really recall the I didn't really form my learning style until I was like in middle school. I don't really recall, yeah, anything
yeah,
before
and
that.
then and also to just add on to that for me because she realized I'm just all over the place. It was okay, boo boo, color a page or play with this thing, have a little sensory input while I'm reading this. And that means that you receive whatever the hell I'm saying right now.
I see. And how would I find my child's learning style?
There's actually a
Good
test for it.
question.
Oh, is
There's
there?
an
Yeah.
assessment. Yeah, it's been a long, long time since I've looked it up. There's one for adults, I'm sure. Actually, I remember doing this in college. Let's see, learning style assessment. Um, it for kids, it has to be, obviously quite uh simpler, more simple, simpler.
Okay.
Um, I guess
Could
it's
you not do
probably a
like an
challenge.
assessment?
It's a challenge. I think it's a real challenge to do that for really little kids, and it's probably best to stick with like a typical approach. But it's all about being like learning yourself as the educator, like seeing how they respond to you reading something, versus you having them read it to you. I mean, you can't. Learning styles are limited when you're learning to read, right? Because there's there's you have to learn to read first before you have
Yeah.
Well, you have to
um
read.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a model. It's called, I remember now, I'm looking it up. It's called a VARK model: visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic. And many kids, when they're super young, are kinesthetic learners, so they'll perceive things so much more clearly if they're able to like sense, like to feel it. So for example, teaching letters to very little kids by tracing them in like a pan filled with cornstarch is one way, to help them like retain that information. It's a lot easier for them than holding a pencil because they're remembering the feeling of the cornstarch or flour on their fingers. And like it actually, they probably enjoy it because it's kind
Mm.
of fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I mean also another thing just to tack on to that. I was I think pretty nonverbal in the beginning of my life. Or I was introduced into sign language pretty easily.
Oh yeah.
Um, but introducing sign language at an early age when the body is still understanding, oh, I'm a human, I can talk. But the sign for more and help and go and eat um, might be things that you want to do as well.
Okay.
Um,
So not like
I think
teach them the letters, but like basic signs for
no,
things that are
yeah, like
important.
they want to communicate with you, right? Like I have the ability right now to speak to you, Loki, which is again a blessing. But if there was a moment where I could not, I might say something like, "Oh, you know," and that's kind of the sign language moment of just like, okay, here you go, yeah, okay. When I was growing up, my parents taught me how to say more and eat. More is a very easy sign, and then eat is just put your one finger, like if you're like an Italian woman, if you put that to your mouth, that's eat.
Mm.
yeah.
Um,
And
so like those kinds of simulations, all
I
that fun
think
stuff.
the other advantage, to being a parent and educator too, is that you were there for the entirety of their like toddler development. So you're uh, a lot more well versed in like how they've learned the things they already do know. Like, um, I think that's probably takes a it helps a lot when you're gearing like a preschool program or a kindergarten learning program, when you remember how he or she like first learned how to like follow directions, or like, you know, the first time like they had to get themselves out of a sticky situation. You learn a lot about how their little brains think. So um it probably would become a little evident over time, um what works best. But again, learning process, right? Like there's a lot of info to take in, um about each kid as they grow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, still touching on learning styles, what are your opinions, learning style versus teaching style?
Hmm.
What do you mean by that?
Because I'm sure I've experienced this before, where I had a math teacher who would do the lectures, would uh, go over the signs and make sure we all got it. For whatever reason, I just could not focus with this teacher. I don't know if it was the way she talked, the overreaction she did, maybe she distracted me. I don't know. But the next year, I took the same class at a different school, different teacher. It was a guy, uh, and I actually learned way more with him because of the sayings he would say. Because the one thing I do remember from his class is, uh, I know he would pull out a fraction and then would start dividing it or multiplying it, and he was like, "Okay, I know everyone's gonna start moaning when I start doing these fractions, but remember, fractions are friends, not food." And then he would just keep going like that, and I'd be like, "What the fuck?" And then he like would show the easiest way to like do these fractions, and I'm just like, "Huh, I get it. Why do I get it? I don't understand." But fractions are
Yeah, that's
friends,
fair enough.
not food.
That's fair enough. That's fair
And
enough.
I'm just like, I get it with this teacher. So I feel like there are different teaching styles. Like
Hmm.
maybe one way you teach is like over exaggeration. You do different voices at certain things, and like how do you know if you're perhaps distracting from the learning? And like you said, maybe you were analyzing their emotion and the motion of their hand and things, and you were too busy focusing on that. Um,
Yeah, so the reason I said that was because of, from my understanding of my life, it's because of our family. But um, at the same time, I understand why ADHD was on the autism spectrum for a hot minute. It's not anymore on the DSM, I think. Cat, maybe? You can.
um I don't think so.
Yeah, okay. That was taken off. But there are certain things that relate to that. Just overstimulation, um, over what the fuck is going on, all that fun stuff. So, um, in terms of, to bring it back to being homeschooled, um, there were times where my dad would be downstairs and just like jamming out to hot music, and he'd be just sitting there, just dee 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 dee.
you're like, I know this song.
And I walk down there and be like, "Hi, how are you? What's going on? Are you okay?" And he'd be like, um, "We're just chilling out." I'm like, "Okay, why you chilling out?" He's like, "Because I had a long day." I'm like, "Okay, fair enough." And so that communication, effective. I know what is expected of me. Valnas. Also, Papa, thank you. And also great music.
You start jamming
He's a
out yourself.
Kansas fan.
Oh, I see. You start jamming out there.
Mm-hmm.
And Kat, do you have anything to add to the learning style versus teaching style?
Yeah. I definitely recall teachers, uh definitely in college and in some of the co-op courses that we would take, that I struggled really to connect with, and like would get distracted on. I think, uh, I have a tendency to ramble a lot. I try really hard to organize my thoughts. because but it's difficult. And in a learning environment, because of that, if I'm hearing someone who is disorganized in their speech when they're just like describing something and they're just narrating it constantly with very little stop, to summarize what was stated before, I just get lost. So, um, I think that's kind of why uh maybe visual elements are important. Like, I
Okay.
know a lot of people misuse whiteboards and chalkboards in teaching, like instead of using it to enhance the learning, it's more distracting. um but that effective use of like a written whiteboard that has a summary of the entire thing that was discussed, like to look at that at the end of a class is like was very helpful to me. And but again, I think it go it definitely, if you're an organized uh individual, if you're able to like plan the session and it's clear and succinct and you can bring in like interesting moments to it, like you mentioned, like with the teachers, like, fractions are friends, not food. That that's really cute, and people are like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna remember that." So like using mnemonics like that. It's not really a mnemonic that's being used to specifically understand a certain concept, but it is a phrase that people will remember and engage with. It worked for you. So like teachers, I think, who are able to like add that kind of uh and not like, it's not distracting. It just draws the person in. So I guess that's helpful. um, I don't know if I'm really answering what you said though.
Well, to
uh,
to add more to that story, that same teacher, near the end of the year, brought out imaginary numbers, and then I had a midlife crisis.
oh,
Because
yeah.
once you get into that, you're just like, my life is a lie. Why does this exist? This shouldn't exist.
I'll be honest with you, my weakest subject is definitely mathematics, and I don't remember shit. Like, it's really lucky that I can calculate the square footage of my office, but I think that's pretty much about all I could do. And maybe a little bit of algebra, but I don't remember any of that shit. Like, none of it. None of it.
And are you the math genius, BooBoo?
um, I like algebra. I'm okay. Yeah. Unfortunately, yeah, I am. Okay, I'll admit it. Okay.
So you stole some of the juice that was for your sister, and you just hogged it all now.
I
So
Boo boo!
threw it
Give
into
me
my
my juice!
mouth.
Boo
What
boo!
can I say?
Give it!
you got it from her foot that one time that you.
She sapped it from me.
Yeah, it's like no math for you.
Math vampire.
uh, so, um, what were the long-term effects of homeschooling as an adult?
Well, we talked about this a little bit. I think in general, I like to consider myself pretty self-motivated and good at planning and organizing because in high school, um, we didn't talk about this too much, but our mom kind of allowed us to structure our days. So we would have an expected amount of work that needed to be completed in the week. And we would have a log, like basically like a binder that had the subjects and the amount of work we needed to do. And then we would write out how much we did each day and plot it out, like divide it up into even chunks of um, or amounts or whatever. And that really helped me in college because I would look at my coursework and say, all right, I know I'm going to have a really long class this day, so I'm not going to save this homework for that day. Like I'm going to, get it
Hmm.
done before that. So like
Okay.
just that kind of thing uh is definitely like a long-term advantage, I suppose. Boo boo, do you have
Yeah. So everything was fine until I grew into my own self. um, I so during the middle of my junior year time frame, I worked on a documentary and learned how to edit, do filming, all that fun stuff. for a documentary about mental health. And unfortunately, when you work on that, you hear people talking about mental health. And then you're like, oh, I have that. Is just me? Okay. Is that just me? Okay, great. Okay. um, and then during that time, I was just dealing with being in a Christian community who doesn't like queer people and realizing that I'm also a queer individual. And so there were a lot of pros and cons within that. Um, I was playing music, which I still do. And I
Yeah.
learned a lot from that community. I'm very grateful. But the takeaway is communities are communities. There's always going to be shitty people.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of it, in my belief, they mean the best.
So
And I think that can be said for a lot of things.
So curiously, because I'm sure they didn't touch on that. The whole queer community being homeschooled. How did you find out about it?
The internet.
Okay, so you were
Um,
just diving in through Google, I'm assuming.
yeah, like I found that.
Okay, you went through the rabbit hole like most of us.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. It was a
Okay.
whole moment.
Find out so many things that way.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
and unfortunately I wasn't able to come out. I was outed a whole moment um because of the Christian community. And also there are pluses and minuses about having a homeschool community. It becomes very isolated very quickly. Um
Yeah, but
so
isolated, modify that. Like isolated within a group. It's really interesting. It's still very social, but in a it's like
it doesn't expand to many people, it expands to the people that you know. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
yeah, like well, maybe so it's almost like there's different generations that we're talking about, right? Different different generations in our homeschool experience because you're I think like the lifestyle you guys that you and our other sister had when I went away to college was definitely different, and that 7-year gap really accounts for it includes a chunk of time where a lot of changes occurred as well.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, even just dealing with me and my sister, it feels like it's a whole generational gap. Like some of the things she experienced, I can't relate.
Yeah.
Because in my time, nuns were still around with rulers. Like
Oh,
that
Jesus.
was my time. She never experienced that. I
Ugh.
had nuns in the classroom and a nun principal. So, like, yeah, like when I bring that up, they're like, "Oh wow, yeah, I cannot relate to that." It's like my sister had a completely normal, like, school educator principal, but yeah, no, I had like very very religious teachers, and
Mm,
they were very strict. Like we're talking strict with rulers, they would hit you kind of things, and that was acceptable
jeez.
back then because you know God loves you, or whatever they say. I forgot.
I mean, he sure does when he hits you in the back of your hand. Very nice. I feel love. I'm feeling loved. Very nice.
Yes, yes.
Oh,
Always feeling love, being hit with a shillelagh.
oh dear God.
There
I
was-
definitely find there to be some advantages to leaving corporal punishment out of the education system, for sure.
yeah. I mean, I think if anything, it distracts because then you're just, you know, it you're being quote unquote assaulted while trying to
Yeah,
learn, and then you figure being assaulted while learning, and then you're just like, do I really want to learn now? No, I'm gonna cause trouble now because causing trouble is more fun.
yeah,
I mean, again, that relates to like being homeschooled because everything that you do, right? It's your parents.
yep.
You're gonna get disciplined by them. But also you're being educated by them. So, you get hit by your parents or disciplined by your parents, and then you have to make a decision. Is this from an educator's perspective or is this from my parents' perspective? And it's purely because of how a parent or educator is displaying themselves and
Mm.
making
Mm.
sure that is clear in certain times. Um,
Has there ever been a lapse where you were unsure whether it was your educator
oh,
or your parent?
100%. Yeah. 100%. Um, there were many times during my childhood where I could tell that my parent was trying to figure out how to help me and didn't know how to do it. And they used to, if I was on the computer for too long, they used to leave me with a ball, and I used to like run the ball and like bounce the ball in our base room stairs, which sounds sad, but it's not sad. I had a great time. But it was like, okay, you can't do this, so stimulate yourself on something else
Okay,
while we figure out what the hell is going on.
I see. Sticking with like Boo Boo, your specific situation, when did uh your parent find out that it was more than just, oh, my child is like can't focus or anything like that? Did they ever find
Only
out?
until I got diagnosed when I was 20 years old.
So they needed that
So 3 years ago.
diagnosis
Yeah.
to really let that settle in that my
Yeah.
child has ADHD. Okay.
So I got the diagnosis because of my ex pushing me to do that, and then which I'm very grateful for. I started on medication. Medication was not great, and during that time, finally they kind of understood. I don't think they fully understand. Kat, I'm not sure if you have any influence
Uh,
on that.
oh, you mean perspective? So while our parents are excellent educators and very kind people, they're so I actually was thinking of this, Loki, when you were talking about mental health and the perception of like your community, how
Mm-hmm.
basically it just does not exist and a problem isn't a problem for a kid until it can't be addressed by the church and whatever. So there's some of that in our childhood, and it definitely came more to the forefront with Boo Boo and them coming out or being outed. Um, there's it, so obviously you understand how Christians perceive people who are non-binary and have who align with different um genders and other preferences. So I think that they did not have the language or experience or anything to really deal with it in a loving way for Boo Boo, and
Mm-hmm.
that was really sad. There's a lot of stuff that comes with growing up in a religious community.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of our school experiences were in a religious environment, so I just want to make sure you understand that.
Okay.
But we were involved in the church, so yeah. I mean, it made for like kind of a tricky parent relationship when you add that in. I I don't know. I just don't think they were. I think they have some ignorance that uh, they're unwilling to. They were unwilling to deal with. I don't know how else to say it. It's disappointing for me as an older sister to observe it, and makes me sad because I love, 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 and support Boo Boo and everything they do. So, which they know. But yeah, I
Well,
don't
I
know.
appreciate that. I mean, from being I've been the longest with the family before I moved recently. So mom and dad are again big educators, which we love,
Yes.
and they want to involve themselves in all of our relationships, growing moments, and all that fun stuff. And but at the same time, you mentioned earlier, Loki, like the weird how to be an educator slash parent. What is that? Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think my parents kind of missed that because it just felt like a distant teacher that was living in my room. Like, hi, how are you? Nice to see you. What are you eating? Oh, that's nice. Okay, goodbye.
Well,
Like,
and I think more than that too, like, just, like, there might have been some old school perceptions of mental, uh, differences and, I just don't think that it ever really occurred to our mom to have you diagnosed with anything, like, to have you I just don't think that that's something that occurred
no,
to
because
her.
she didn't want to.
I don't know, yeah, it could be that, who
Like, or
knows?
she
I've
didn't
never.
know that
Yeah.
she was herself. She forgot.
Well, I
She's
have
boo boo extra.
I do suspect sometimes that she actually has, ADHD, but it's kind of more, like, similar to me, like, super organized all like,
High
50%
function.
of the time. Yeah, and then, like, completely disorganized the other time, like, 0 motivation, bottom of the barrel effort. But I do think those moments were really few and far between in my overall school experience and life experience with her, and BooBoo saw more of that burnout, than I did. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, you're right.
I see. Um, but it seems like Boo Boo, you through the care of these exes and through other resources, you seem to accommodate yourself fairly well. I'm
Yeah.
sure it must have been a struggle for you,
Well, yeah.
but
I
you
mean,
made it.
crying on the floor so many times is
Oh my
like, you know
god!
what? Maybe no. You know, I'd like to not. And it was definitely I'm very grateful for the people that I have back at home. Um, because having that connection, and I don't even want to say connection. It feels like glue at certain times. Sorry, Crystal, if you're still watching, it's not about glue. But having that that glue, where at moments you feel like everything is nothing, and then somebody comes by and just latches on to you and is like, "Hey, dude, let's do this together." Um, I really needed that because 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 my upbringing and Kat's upbringing, it's so complicated in so many different ways. And because it is religious motivated, because I am one of the first queer individuals within the family and kind of the little black sheep of everything,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very grateful for the people that have helped me, that have stood like directly behind me and been like, okay, boo boo, you can do this. Like, shut up, do it. And um, shout out to the outer reaches. Oh no.
Yeah, it definitely should be said that your your whole like experience of like education and social everything that comes with that, boo, like social environments and everything would have been very different if you had had like a more um like group learning place. I'm very curious how things would have turned out for sure.
I would have been in an institution. I kid you not.
No, no,
No,
no.
I would have been in a classroom in not a great place. And they would have been like, "Oh, they're highly functioning, they're doing great." And I would have just been like vibing in the background, just being like, "Can I go home?"
So do you
But
feel?
I think
mom, the reason why I say that though, my mom, Loki,
Mm-hmm.
really influenced overall education, like continual. let's go touch grass.
I see. Um, so do you feel that because you were such high functioning, uh, individual while as a child and as a teen, to why you didn't get that diagnosis because you were such high functioning?
It wasn't an offered thing. Um, I didn't think it was going to be a thing. So I just thought that
I
that was just the way that I was.
if I could pop in, I think that that after both me and my younger sister, our other sister, left for college, I think that my well, we actually had an exchange student um, start living with the family after I had left, and
Oh,
I think that a lot of our parents' focus kind of shifted, perhaps in a non-beneficial way for Boo. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what I
Oh no,
slightly
you're not wrong.
suspect.
You're not
Um,
wrong.
I I think it's just I think that they're like mom's teaching style and just like your overall like relationship with her as as a parent child whatever was challenging and exhausting for you both, and I think um that maybe it's like in high school when you probably really should have been assessed, there was just a lack of like I think she had kind of come up against a wall and she just was kind of falling short and didn't know how to do it. But that's just my guess. I really don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't know
It's such a
either.
different experience. I got I was just every step of my education was so guided and so structured and so everything like out of my hands, I would say, that it's kind of odd looking at Boo Boo's experience, noting how different it was in that regard, especially in high school. So, um, I don't know, but it makes me, it definitely makes me like as a like if I was to have kids, I mentioned might potentially uh, homeschool them. I would be so like hyper aware of their needs as a result because I just think that just didn't happen with you, Bobo. It's, it's a bummer.
It's okay.
But you're doing good, okay?
I'm doing great.
standing on the table. Multiple people have noticed this. That you're on the table.
I'm on the
Yeah.
table.
Hands
Mama, look. I'm on
up.
So, Kat, how would you, like, hypothetically, how would you feel if you went through the curriculum that Boo Boo went through, noting how different it is?
uh,
Do you think you would be
well,
able to, come out the same, or some things would have changed?
there's just a lot of differences between Boo and I, like personality and just like how our parents formed us. I think um I think I just got a lot of parental energy thrown at me, so
Okay.
I tend to be I don't know really what your school was like, Boo. Like what your curriculum and the stuff you were working on was like. There's just a lot of years. I mean, I think at that point I was like 2 years into college, right? When you were in high school?
table.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
Until senior year, I did jack shit. I did
yeah,
nothing.
that kind of happens to homeschoolers though, because you like finish all your requirements and then it's like, well, where am I now? Um, yeah,
Midlife crisis. Here we come.
right at 18 or 17 in my
Yeah.
case. I I I think that there might have been less effort on my mom's part with Boo. Uh, so I might have gotten kind of bored, and Boo is probably bored too,
Oh,
right?
100%. I mean, I think just to bring it back again, it's very easy to lose the focus or become frustrated as an educator at certain times.
Hmm.
And you really have to think, okay, this is my child, right? You're going to homeschool your child. This is my child. I love them. I made this. Cool. Um, but how are they going to learn? And there's different ways to do that. And we had situations where we were definitely bored and overwhelmed, and there were moments of just being like, okay, watch this 30-minute VHS tape for a time and then go eat raviolis and have a fun time. But at the same time, within my family, they would literally like strap me to my chair with a belt.
Oh my
Um,
god! What?
yeah,
I mean, to be
because
fair, I don't really know how else they would have gotten you to eat your food. I
well,
don't know.
if you would have
If I was
asked
to,
me to do it, then maybe.
yeah, but
But
you, well, well, I don't agree with it, but man, like your energy level, if we could all have that, I think we would all just be just wow. Like you had so much energy. I just don't know if they knew what to do. And that's a real problem. Like they should have known it. They should have figured it out. But I remember it was hard to get you to stay in one place for
yeah,
sure.
but don't tie me down, my
Yeah, that's
guy. I'm
I
like
agree. I agree that's a
5 years
little
old.
It's like you needed the resistance. It's what you needed. Something to
fucked up.
to.
I still slipped out, dude. I'm still a little son of a bitch, you know. But
So you think a couple laps around the house would have helped to get you
exactly.
in the
So that's
mood to
it
eat?
though. So like, okay, child needs XYZ, how to make, while making sure that we are respecting what they need or need to do. Um, yeah.
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 Okay.
I
I thought there was
was
more to that.
thinking there was nothing else. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Definitely. So, wild child, too much energy. Make sure they TLDR. Make sure they do a couple laps around the house before you tie them down to a chair and force them to eat
Yeah.
raviolis. Uh, did you ever compare yourself to your fellow school peers?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
constantly.
Yeah, all the time.
I mean, we were, I would say a little bit, at least I was, and maybe even our other sister feel that we were a bit conceited about our experiences as homeschoolers. I think we understood the advantages and felt like we were uh I mean, it's hard to ignore. I don't want to sound like an asshole, but
Go ahead. I'm
there's
kidding.
there's just so many there are really a lot of advantages to giving kids like direct educational opportunities that aren't burdened with like shit that doesn't belong in there, like you
Mhm.
know uh violence in a classroom environment or in a school is scary and stressful and like obviously impacts the ability of a child to learn. Like it's terrible, it shouldn't exist, but it's there. And even just like poor behavior from, students who are struggling or kids who are struggling, they have like issues with their family. I mean, everyone's got a story, right? Like
Mhm.
so much going on. But it's really a lot to expect a teacher to address all of the individual learning styles and needs of so many kids, especially when they are bringing in so many things with them from home. So I, you know, in light of that, I feel like the friends that I had who were not, who didn't have parents who made that decision to educate them at home, I feel like they often had clear deficits in some ways, like learning, like the ability to be organized or like their vocabulary or their interests or like they just were different than us and um I don't know. See, that's why I don't want to sound like an asshole because obviously, if you spend much more time reading than doing other things, then you're going to have access to a larger vocabulary and you're probably going
Mhm.
to have more interest in books because that's what you do. So I'm not saying that it's any better or any worse. I just feel like it was clear that we were different. And instead of feeling like, we're weird, we chose to feel proud of ourselves, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but I still think that we were a bit conceited about it, and
Okay. Do you feel like it would be like, wow, okay, stop waving your privilege around my face. Clearly, you're better
Well,
than
I
me.
mean,
Thank you.
I personally felt like that. When I was growing up, it wasn't a fun time. There were many moments of sleeping in a car with my girlfriend at the time and all that fun stuff. And also having like $10 in my bank account, and all that fun stuff. But within the family unit, growing and learning was a little bit difficult.
I could imagine, especially if
yeah.
like the people you hold close are. I like calling it schooled peers. Those of us who did go to school like throughout all our lives and never been in homeschool. Uh, I could imagine the gap of understanding because clearly you would know way more stuff that your parent would have taught you that
Mhm.
actually means something rather than having like useless information that you're never ever going to use because you work a grocery like job or your life experience was completely different.
Mhm.
um so I can see that. I mean, even within the school peers, like I would compare myself because I was Hispanic and I went to a mainly white Catholic school. So I
Mhm.
was comparing myself that way because there was a cultural difference. Later, once I graduated, I come to find out there's more Hispanics going to that school. I was like, oh, maybe I would have connected more, but then I'd be like, nah, probably not. Uh, I was always the outlier, the black sheep, as BooBoo calls it. I was always the weird kid. So, um, that's just shaped how I am. Um, but yeah, I see that. So,
yeah.
was there a culture shock when your homeschooling was done?
No.
I think that, given what we were talking about, like our lifestyle at the time, we definitely engaged with lots of different people, but it wasn't like it's generational, right? Like Boo's experience with this is a little different than mine. I There wasn't too much of a culture shock. I think I got rid of it pretty quickly. I had a job in my senior year, um, working for actually that same state rep who organized trips to the Capitol for us. It was a really good
And
experience.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I was also working as a lead editor and producer and director of a documentary during freshman to post senior year.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and in that, we both encountered people quite different from us, and like in a more adult setting, for sure. Uh, Um, you know, not like a school environment. So we almost kind of got a bit of a a look into a professional adult environment before college age happened.
I see. So you were able to get that experience before you were like, just thrown into the wolves, as they say. Like, okay,
Yeah.
well, homeschooling's done. Here you go, college.
Right, and I actually took college courses at different colleges in our local area, so I had some um, experience being in that kind of environment before I left to go to Boston.
Okay. And did you find that you learned just as well being in a classroom comparative to being at home?
Funny
Oh,
story.
here we go. Story time.
Yeah,
Oh, let's settle down. Okay, okay.
I will try to make this brief. And I graduated in 2010 and went to a college in right outside of Boston, a Christian college. It was a bit of a compromise between my parents and I. It was very far away. They didn't like how far it was, but it was Christian, so good, cool. So we got there. I had four classes, like a normal caseload or course load, and I really, really struggled socially, and I still question whether this is a homeschool thing versus a the personality thing, because I just tend to get socially exhausted very quickly.
Mm, okay.
I've always been that way. Even like hanging out with people I love, people are my friends. Like I just get tired so easily. Um, Especially like when it's in person. It's just a lot. So I was having a lot of trouble maintaining the balance that I spoke about earlier, like life, friends, schoolwork, whatever. I just felt like I was falling into a big hole and could not have a chance to like get my footing. And it was also the first time I'd ever really been alone. So um, none of my friends went to any colleges like mine. They all like stayed home and didn't travel really. So I felt a little bit lonely in that way because it was hard to talk to people about my experience from back home and be like, yeah, yeah, me too. Oh yeah, I'm having the same issue. So I, all to say, I basically failed my first year of college,
Mm.
and I I failed 3 classes and got a D in another one. And it what happened was a lot of stuff. I was dealing with some like mental health things. I have anxiety. It goes along with, I think, being a perfectionist and a people pleaser. It's exhausting and kind of just comes with it. So yeah, so I had a lot of, I was very overwhelmed, and um, I was very like ashamed of the fact that I had failed. I still look at my degree right in front of me, like my paper, and say, I just can't believe I got through it. But mostly, like I just wish that I the thing is, if I had done it all online, if I had done all these courses online or had come into to some classes in person and some online, I think I would have succeeded much more. But the entire college like massive experience was so much for me. I just got swallowed up, and
Mm.
I wasn't prepared. And I honestly, uh, knowing like all of the college courses I had taken before, and all of the preparation that my mom had tried to give me, like I still don't think, I don't think I could have done anything any differently and had it an improved experience, because I just think that I was so um I don't know, maybe
Isolated?
the fact, yeah, I guess I think that ironically, the last couple of years of booze education experience, high school, um, with our mom being more like hands off, was something I really probably should have had myself before leaving for college,
Well,
because
that's
I think,
interesting though, because I did not need that because I was so ADHD at the time, and like dealing with a lot of trauma, a lot of coming out is not a fun thing,
Mm-hmm.
and dealing with those kind of queer communities are not fun. Um, a lot of PTSD, not great. 0 out of 10, but
Mm.
Kat, you definitely had a weird like I love that we're doing this interview right now because Kat has such a different perspective than I do, but a very similar interpretation. Like the 7 years means so much. Like, where have you been? If you were in my current year when things were happening, they wouldn't have happened. If I was in your current year of 7 years happening, they wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, it's very strange how how it all unfurled. But um, anyways, long story short, I went back home, head between my knees, throwing up and sad.
Oh my
That
god. Like it
I
affected you
was,
that bad?
oh yeah, because my parents, and this is why I said this to you earlier, my parents took the failure of those courses so personally. It was awful. My mom was crying, like sobbing in front of me, looking at me like, I have failed. And I was like,
Oh my
Mom,
god.
I can't help you with that, because like I'm dealing with my own stuff. So, there are some clear challenges to pushing from a holistic educational lifestyle like we had, and then moving to becoming an independent adult, and then also noting like personal like challenges of like self-discovery and development like BooBoo was talking about. Like we didn't have a lot of supports for that particular stage in our lives. And I don't I haven't talked about my high school experience as much, but it was chaotic as well, not to the degree that Boo experienced, but I think that my parents were great at maintaining the balance as we were younger, but then once we hit high school and became like pre-adults, they really struggled to meet us like at where we were at. Like to become in fact, at that point, I don't even think when I was in high school that my mom became a teacher again ever. I think she became a parent permanently from that point on, even
Oh,
in
okay.
education. Like
So
it
she retired there.
I
Once.
don't know. I guess yeah, these challenges of like bringing up a child into the world and then watching them become an adult is a challenge already. But when you add what we're talking about into it, it's like like it's like adding hot sauce to soup. Like it's way too hot. The soup is like super spicy hot, and then you eat, you just keep pouring the hot sauce in there, and somehow you're gonna tolerate it, but you can't help it, because you want
Yeah.
the hot and spicy. But then you just get to the point where it's like way too much, and I think that's you know basically what it was like to have such a complicated life
It's
where our
all hot
parents were so
sauce.
involved. Yeah, it's too much. And then when all of a sudden you're faced with like having to deal with the world that's making the soup for you, you don't really know where you're at. Like it's just this is a horrible analogy. And I'm an English major and I want to take all of that back.
And
I
I'm
hate
just
my
rolling
analogy.
with it, and I'm like, we'll
I
just
love
keep
it.
adding to it.
Thank you. I'm sorry. It's shit. If you gave me more time, I probably would figure out a better one. All to say, yeah, that transition was hard for Boo and I both.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's definitely good to know because I would have never thought of that particular transition would have been a major hurdle for the both of you at that
Mm.
point. Well, since we are in kind of the more serial territory, uh, was there Boo Boo? You mentioned this, but I'm curious. Was there any more trauma from homeschooling?
Yes. So much.
Seems like your whole life has been nothing but trauma.
Oh yeah. I mean, um because we were involved in a Christian community and that didn't go great. Um there were a lot of closed doors, um phones taken away, a lot of things that shouldn't be happening to a person when they're young. To me personally, um, it prompted a lot of mental health issues for me personally. But it also affected a lot of other people that were not directly into my family. Um, I lost personally a friend or two within the community, just because they were overwhelmed.
Hmm.
And
With
they
the
also
homeschooling?
were, yeah,
Okay.
uh, they were
With
here.
homeschooling or with other stuff.
No, no, they were homeschooled. They said nope.
They're just like, I
And
can't
so
handle it.
yeah, so
Hmm.
so they went to the ether and hope they're okay. Um,
Yeah, there's definitely more to that for sure, but
the mental health aspect of it is concerning. Um, it's important to talk about. It's important to discuss and all that fun stuff.
So,
But
would
yeah,
you recommend therapy while in homeschooling?
oh, 100%.
Okay.
100%. I had to be pushed to do therapy. I'm the kind of person, like, maybe Kat can say this, but like it's like, boo boo, you need to do this. And I'm like, what? What
mhm.
doing? Oh,
Yes.
okay, forgot. Okay, doing. I'm
Yeah,
doing
sometimes my
it.
my cranky older sister comes out because I'm all task oriented and shit, and baby's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, sure, whatever." And then like 3 weeks later, we're like, "Remember when we talked about that thing you were gonna do?" And
You
you're
haven't
like,
done
"Oh
it?
yeah,"
Oh yeah, I forgot
which is
about that.
it's fair. I do the same thing, but I yeah yeah yeah, but I mean
Yeah, therapy meanwhile, or just like
yeah,
social services meanwhile,
I think it
especially if you don't have a community to align with,
Mm-hmm.
is important just to keep in another person's influence into the student or your child or whoever, whatever their life may be, is important, so that it's consistent, it's different, they're growing in different ways. And
yeah. I think I agree. Like as an adult now, I think if like I would definitely recommend for for children who are homeschooled to have um, trusted adults other than their parents who they interact with, because there needs to be some variety of like perspectives on how the kid is doing, and people weighing in, family or whatever, but also like it's important for them to be able to develop trusted relationships with other adults,
Okay.
and which doesn't it might have to be facilitated more because you're not in a school environment, you know what I mean, like.
Sorry, my
well, I
cat
mean,
is yelping.
well, I mean, dude, this has been such a fun conversation.
Oh
Do you
yeah.
have any like ending like questions or anything?
Uh,
I mean, we've been going for like 3 hours at this
yeah,
point.
that's. I'm actually quite shocked. Kat, did you have any more? Besides that was a huge traumatic experience. I'm pretty sure for both you and your mother. It seems like. Did you have any prior to that traumatic experience?
Yes, mostly related to our this is not something you usually bring up at the end of a conversation, but I guess I could say succinctly that as, being in a Christian household, our ability to date was like non-existent, and so I struggled to
Oh, I
like
could
have
imagine. I
yeah.
could imagine.
Yeah, and I have a lot of I really wanted to date some people. But that really was not allowed, and that was a point of contention, and really kind of soured a lot of my relationships with um it, well, my relationship with my mom and dad as I got older. Because I was just trying to make decisions, and I just wasn't allowed to make decisions about it at all, because this, it couldn't exist in my life. So
Mm.
the process, instead of like giving me support and saying, okay, if you want to do this, let me be a supportive person for you, they just said no. So I entered relationships with people anyway, and because I didn't have um support, and I just had my friends, I made a lot of like poor decisions and kind of developed some weird behaviors as a result. Like I definitely got super attached to some of the people I was interested in, and just didn't really learn about how to have healthy like dating relationships until I was in college. And ironically, I married the first guy I met when I was in college, which was
Turn
told.
out to talk.
So my dating life was severely limited, and I think that that definitely uh as a 30-year-old person now, I really wish that I had worked it out with my mom and dad somehow, because their perfect picture of that uh, would have been like, okay, you do your schoolwork, and then you go see your friends if you're interested in a person, which would have been a guy from their perspective, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're interested in a guy, then you can hang out with him with your friends. And if you're really interested, then 5, 6, 7 years later after college, you guys can go out in large groups with other people and get to know each other. So,
Yeah.
which is not dating, by the way. That's
No,
not
that is not dating at all.
In
No,
fact,
and
it was
and
part.
learning through that and just making it practical, at the end of the day you're just frustrated. And not to say though that our education and what we gained from our parents' influence, they had the best in their brain. They wanted to encourage us to
Yeah.
be the best of ourselves that we could be. Unfortunately, they still had a picture of what the best we could be. And so consequently, there is disappointment, there is frustration, there is awkward conversations, but at the end of the day, personally, I am so grateful for my personal experience. Um, yes, it has caused me a lot of trauma, and that's fine. So does any life event in anybody's human life. But at the end of the day, I have a good support, and good family, and people that are willing to learn and cry and be frustrated with me. And I think that that's the best part of being in a homeschool environment. It's so close to home. There isn't a moment where you can't leave. It's always, I'm upset. I'm coming here for a glass of water. Don't look at me.
I see.
Like it's so personal, and I think that's important. And I'm really
And
grateful for it, and I
I
think Kat can agree.
I think it's important to, yes, that we're, like, that if you're a parent choosing to home educate your child, that you receive them with, acceptance and love, and be willing to change your expectations based on their abilities and desires to the best of your ability. Like, um, I think that our parents would generally agree with that, but uh we had just such a close everything. Like, if, like I was talking about before, if we wanted to date somebody, that just wasn't going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like you could just, oh well, okay, sorry, you don't want me to date that person, sorry, I'm going to do it at school anyway. Whatever that means, like, there was no, was just a lot of lack of control and agency, I guess. So that's what I would, say. Like, my experience, Boo Boo's experience, we carry some of these things with us that, um, that have formed us into who we are. Some of them are traumatic, and some are not. Some are just plain stupid and frustrating. But I do think, like,
There
being
are
teachable,
benefits.
yeah, being
Loki, you'll be fine.
being
You're
teachable,
gonna be fine.
being teachable as an adult, for as a model for your child, will prove to be an advantage for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, all of us, yeah, we're all gonna have, like, negative experiences. You can't completely remove that from your child's life. So,
Mm-hmm.
but you can give them, which this is the most invaluable thing you can give them. You can give them the ability to want to understand other people and different things
Mm.
that are, unique to their own life experiences. You give them that desire to learn. I feel like that's something that sets them up for success in anything that they do, because ideally you can teach them to be compassionate and to accept ideas that are different, uh, and or to hold two ideas in their mind at the same time. That's a real challenge, and
Yeah.
especially in this world where everything is supposed to be black and white and very contentious. So that's what I take away from my homeschool experience, for better or for worse.
I see. Well, I've hit the end of my questions. Unless you guys have a questions particularly for me, I don't know what I could share about homeschooling. Tell you all about schooling itself, but that's really all about it.
Well,
You
thank
guys
you
have
Sure.
any
so much
questions?
for the questions and taking time to talk to us.
Oh
Like,
yeah, of course.
obviously, we're very different kinds of people in terms of conversation, but also very similar at the same time. Like,
Yeah.
I'm obviously the younger sister, just being like,
I
and
mean,
then
you could
Kat's
tell
over here just.
by your icon itself. Like, yeah, you could totally tell. That is very you. I can see it.
Thank you
Uh,
so much. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been so fun to talk to you,
yeah.
and
Thank you for having me
um,
on the show. Definitely, just while I have you guys here, um, one of the things on the subject matter that I'm going to tackle is going to be dating and the online dating experience that I've
Oh.
had and some other people have had.
Don't do it. Probably not. Maybe. I don't know. Good luck.
But we'll have a guest that I feel like has had said interesting enough experience. I'm about to lynch this damn cat for
Listen,
screaming.
Loki, I've looked into it recently. I don't know if I want to commit to it. I don't know.
But that would definitely be a subject for another time, would be
All right.
the
sounds
dating
fun.
experience. But besides that, the portal is opening up. You guys have to return back to your IRL lives.
Okay.
Say hello to Lamari. And
Thanks again, dude.
I'll see you all in the next one.
Okay. Bye.